The people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
Imagine a future. The freight trucks that deliver bread and milk to our grocery store shelves, and the buses that take children to school and parents to work. Imagine all the heavy-duty vehicles that keep our supply lines strong and allow our economy to grow. Imagine that they produced zero emissions. Well, you all imagined it. That's why we're here today. Because we have...
Father, before I begin, bless me, Father, for I'm about to sin. Well, I just want you to know, I may be Irish, but I'm not stupid. I married Dominic Giacomo.
I'm sick of this stuff. We have to talk about it because the American people think the reason for inflation is government spending more money. Simply not true.
Now the Ukraine, and St. Patrick's name is now Zelensky.
Just days before Russia's invasion began, I went to the United Nations Security Council to lay out what we believed was about to happen. Again today, we have a strong sense of what Russia could do next. We believe that Moscow may be setting the stage to use a chemical weapon and then falsely blame Ukraine to justify escalating its attacks on the Ukrainian people. Manufacturing events and creating false narratives of genocide to justify greater use of military force is a tactic that Russia has used before, including in Georgia.
So we established a new civil rights cause of action for those whose intimate images were shared on the public screen. How many times have you heard, I'll bet everybody knows somebody somewhere along the line, that in an intimate relationship, what happened was the guy takes a revealing picture of his naked friend or whatever in a compromising position, and then literally, in a sense, blackmails or mortifies that person. Sends it out, put it online.
To go along with this, and I'm seeing through all of your lies, Barack Obama, you wicked, wicked devil!
Welcome back. Another night of Stick with Koolfrogg. America's Shirts will be with me very shortly. I really don't know where he's at the second. I believe he's actually grabbing something to eat at the moment, which could be okay. We do have quite the show that we're going to try getting through here tonight. Hopefully we can go a little bit quicker than we did last night. Last night, that was a long night, and we got a late start going already. And let's just see if we can't just get this going. You know, I am Koolfrogg. That is America's Shirts. We'll be commentating. For sure. There will be some stuff that definitely come up out of tonight's show. We'll start off with, we're going to go straight to Senator Cronin. We're going to do something a little different today. We're not going to stay with the same group, but, you know, we'll still hit on some of them because, you know, there's some interesting information that comes out of these people. So, before we go too far, let's make sure this is like this. Let's go back 5 seconds.
When
of course.
Understanding
and I'm going to boomer straight into it. There you go. Perfect.
Accuse someone of a crime, are you accusing them of being a criminal?
It depends on the context.
We're going to go back just a little bit here and let us start over again.
Crime, ask you, you can.
Senator Feinstein, Senator Cornyn?
Good afternoon, Judge. I understand I'm the last one, maybe before lunch, so if your blood sugar is getting a little low, you can think about having a little break. But
Yeah.
just because the chairman keeps bringing this topic up, let me just ask you one question. When you accuse somebody of a crime, are you calling them a criminal?
Oh, Senator, I haven't accused anybody of a crime.
That's not my question. When in common understanding and in plain English, if you accuse someone of a crime, are you accusing them of being a criminal?
It depends on the context. It depends on what else you say about them. It depends on the circumstances.
How is all that possible? This lady's just ridiculous, and she's really getting on my nerves. I've listened to a lot of footage from her today. I listened to all of it. I got time frames all written out for everything again, and hopefully we can stay on schedule with this or whatever. I'm gonna try pushing this lady through. Through tonight's show, and hopefully she does not get selected for this committee or this lifetime appointment on SCOTUS, because it really is not the right person for this job.
It depends on the circumstances.
Yes.
So you put this in the same category as defining what a biological woman is.
No,
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what she's doing, Mr. Cronin.
You're really not sure.
I didn't say I wasn't sure. I said it depends on the
But you are sure.
No, I said it depends on the circumstances that you're positing as to whether or not you're calling someone a criminal.
I just don't think that's credible, Judge. Let me ask you another question. You talk about the public confidence in the courts, in our institutions, which I agree are very, very important, that the public has confidence in our judiciary. Would you agree with me that to the extent that people perceive that judges, unelected, lifetime tenured judges, are making policy pronouncements or political decisions, that it undermines public confidence?
I do.
Thank you. Yesterday we talked a little bit about precedent, and I know Senator Feinstein, as she does in these hearings, talked about super precedent, and in particular Roe versus Wade. And I want to talk a little bit about that, but first let me just ask you, do you think there's any good reason for the Supreme Court not to overrule a previous decision when they concluded that that decision was wrong?
Very good question by Mr. Cronin there. I mean, if they felt it was wrong at one point in time, or at any point in time, they should totally overrule it and stop running with that law. I mean, if you don't say, well, it's not right, but let's continue doing that.
Thank you, Senator. Again, it's hard for me to answer that question in the abstract. What I'll say is that the Supreme Court has laid out factors beyond just the precedent being wrong as a reason to overturn it.
Well, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. The Supreme Court revisited the issue of separate but equal, which was the law, the constitutional interpretation of the Supreme Court under Plessy versus Ferguson, and overruled that precedent because
Yes.
it concluded it was wrong, right?
I haven't looked carefully at whether all of the different factors that the Supreme Court now uses to overturn were discussed in the opinion, but now the Supreme Court's precedent is to overturn on the basis of a number of different factors and not just whether or not it's wrong.
So are you suggesting that the Supreme Court could not or would not overrule a precedent that it determined was wrongly decided?
No, I'm suggesting that the Supreme Court's case law indicates that it looks at multiple factors.
No, I understand. You go through the stare decisis analysis,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But if it's wrong, that's one of the factors that you consider, right?
Yes, but it's not the only one.
So are you suggesting that there may be circumstances under which the court determines its previous decision is wrong, but it will not overrule it?
The fact that there are multiple factors indicates that the court looks at more than whether or not it's wrong.
Okay. So you would say, if I'm interpreting you correctly, that if the court concludes its previous decision is wrong, it won't necessarily overrule that. It applies a multi-point analysis.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
Back when Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973, generally speaking, the court said that the states may not limit access to abortion pre-viability, but post-viability, there could be some restriction on the right to abortion. Is that generally the...
As a general matter, yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, and then I think it's since 1973, the question of viability has risen again, what that actually means, because now viability was around 28 weeks. That is, the fetus could live outside the womb, but today, because of the advances in medical science, the fetus can live outside the womb after about 23 weeks.
Which is still kind of pushing it at the 23 weeks. It's really, really small and very hard to actually continue to, it's on life support for, the majority of the next month or two while it gains the nutrition and strength it needs to actually continue to live. So, I mean, it is something and very interesting when you see a premature baby that's that small. Seriously, I mean, you hear a heartbeat after about 3 weeks. So, I'm just saying, I question viability and their part, all the time. And where do you actually stop and draw that line? Oh, good start. Let's see here. We got America's shirts. Let's bring him in. Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Yo, can you hear me? And is there too much background noise?
It's good at the moment, and yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
So we're just going over. We started with Mr. Cronin. He was about 3.5 hours into the day. Right after he gets done talking, they actually go to lunch. He was just talking about Roe v. Wade and other things that pertain to the viability of a fetus. If you weren't paying attention, let's hit the play button here quick.
Is that your understanding?
Senator, I haven't studied this, so I don't know the a number of weeks in the way that you're saying.
Well, let's talk a little bit about viability. The line that was drawn for pre-viability and post-viability analysis by the court. What does viability mean when it comes to an unborn child in your understanding?
And why I paused it, what I was saying is the question of viability really upsets me, and it's fairly disturbing. I mean, really, once you hear heartbeat is where I draw the line. It's like there's a heartbeat, that it's living.
Everybody at the moment of conception.
Well, see, and there's people that would say, well, you draw it at the moment of conception. And it's like, well, and I would generally, I'm a father of 3 children. Yeah, exactly. I'm very, very pro-life. But, when it comes down to it, that viability line really needs to be, if they're going to continue doing things the way they are, needs to change from where they're thinking. Because he's like, well, with modern day machinery, 23 weeks. A fetus can potentially live. So it's like,
And
well,
see,
it's still too far. That's too far, man.
Yeah. And it's that whole argument.
Right, exactly, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. Is everybody has a different thought and feeling on what that argument, or where that argument stops. It's like, no, you don't get to argue for the point of something that's not. It's really interesting how they how this has been something that's been talked about over and over and over again, all the way since, like he said, 1973.
What does viability mean when it comes to an unborn child, in your understanding?
Senator, I hesitate to speculate. I know that it is a point in time that
it's like a woman's not really a woman, baby's not really a baby.
He picked on her about that one already. That was the first couple sentences out of his mouth, as he actually said something about, so your stance is something similar to what a woman is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the standards that apply to regulation of the right.
Justice Brennan.
Did you listen to any of this?
Point in his career,
yeah, I listened to most of this actually today, because Uncivil had it on longer than he did yesterday.
Line.
I hate watching any mainstream.
Agree with him?
Senator, I'm not able to comment on viability. There's a case pending in the Supreme Court.
Well, I didn't watch. I listened to a lot of it. Didn't watch it all, but
Right.
Same kind of thing.
I watched it all here with Fox. So then basically
Fox News.
Yeah. So then you can see, she just the words that just came out of her mouth.
Viability. There's a case pending in the Supreme Court right now.
So because there's a case pending in the Supreme Court right now, I can't let you know what my stance is, because if I let you know what my stance is, you won't vote for me.
Well, that is a thing, though.
Or you will vote for me. I know it's a thing. I know it's something that they're waiting to talk about right now, and I would hope that they would actually do this before she was actually even sat.
Yeah. But that's one of the reasons why that guy's retiring, right? Is because, well, if you're going to retire, better do it now, so we make sure we get some hardline leftists.
Right. Exactly. We know that he's retiring, so we need to fill this seat now, and we need to make sure that.
Yep. Just do it now.
This strong black woman.
Yes, the strong black woman. Yeah.
Concerning the issues.
I'm asking you about previous
several times today. Everybody was just like, "Oh, she's so amazing! Oh my God!" It's several times today that happened. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's fine. You're fine. You're totally fine.
Court right now, concerning the issues.
I'm asking you about previous decisions, but I hear you. No one suggests that a 20-week-old fetus can live independently outside the mother's womb. Do they?
I don't know.
I mean, the child will need to be fed or sheltered and all the other essentials to sustain human life. So there's no suggestion that after 20 weeks that a child can live independently, correct?
Senator, I'm not a biologist. I haven't studied this. I don't.
Again, we're talking about being a biologist.
Right.
Hey, come on.
No.
You don't know whether an unborn child could live outside the womb at 20 weeks gestation?
What I know is that the Supreme Court has tests and standards that it's applied when it evaluates regulation of the right of a woman to terminate their pregnancy. They have the court has announced that there is a right to terminate up to the point of viability, subject to the framework.
That kind of shows her
Roe and
perspective there,
Casey.
right? The court has announced, so that means everything's good, right? Because the Supreme Court said. Oh wait, but I thought the judges were supposed to be like following the law, not really the courts. Oh well, court precedent too, don't you remember? Even Amy Coney Barrett said that. That pissed me off then. Because court precedent. Well, I guess if we're going to follow court precedent, I guess we should go back to oh shoot, what was that decision where the slavery decision where they made if you find anybody that's a freed slave or anybody that ran away from slavery in the South over the Mason-Dixon line, you are obligated to return them.
yeah.
I forget. Oh shoot, what was that? What was that decision? Very famous one. But anyway, yeah. Let's go back to precedent here. Let's just keep going back to. I mean, we could go down that whole rabbit hole, like, freaking all day long and everything.
Right.
But just to point out, like, that's her perspective. Is precedent when it suits us, of course. As it pertains to review.
Oops. So it's
ability subject to the framework in Roe and Casey, and there's a pending case right now that is addressing these issues.
The Constitution doesn't mention the word abortion, correct?
That's correct.
Just like it doesn't mention the word marriage, correct?
That is correct.
Holy shit, she knows something.
So as you and I discussed, perhaps ad nauseum yesterday, when we were talking about substantive due process.
Take it easy there, lady.
This is one of those unenumerated rights.
You got two facts correct. That's it's a little much for you. You need to chill here. Take a breath. Take a breather.
Even though it's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution itself. Correct?
The court has interpreted the due process clause of the 14th Amendment to include...
Right. We talked about substantive due process yesterday. And that's what this is, right? The Supreme Court cases that deal with the right of abortion is a result of substantive due process analysis like you and I talked about yesterday.
Yes.
Okay. In the... you remember when you were confirmed for the Court of Appeals, in that process we had a hearing, and then we sent you questions for the record, what we call QFRs around here.
Yes.
And one of those, question number 10, was, does the Constitution protect rights that are not expressly enumerated in the Constitution? As part of your answer, you said, you mentioned Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and you said this, and I'll quote, they articulate a limited right to terminate a pregnancy. What is the limitation that you understand that was pronounced in Roe versus Wade and Casey when it comes to a right to terminate an abortion? What are the limitations under current law?
Under current law, as I understand it, there are limitations in so far as there can be regulation of that right pre-viability.
Okay, let's stop her on thought here for a second. It seems as though we have a visitor of Jimmy YouTube. What's up, buddy?
Greetings and hallucinations. How are y'all?
We're doing well. How are you doing?
Oh, just peachy.
Speaking of hallucinations, are you a hallucination?
I am actually a mirag.
Oh. This is quite interesting.
Yes, indeedy. What do you guys got going on here?
We
got this pedo bitch up here. I mean, we got this lovely lady
this
up here.
This Ketanji Brown Jackson, and she's being
Member
questioned by
Jackson
Mr. Cronin right now, and he's asking her about viability and other things to do with Roe v. Wade. And did you have any thoughts on any of that, or were you listening yet, or?
No, I just was checking on some family here, and now I've settled back down in my room for the time
You
being.
stumbled into our room.
Yes,
Welcome.
indeedy.
So-
Welcome to Oz, bitch.
So it's this lady that we really kind of. I don't like her. I don't like her at all. I don't like anything that she's about.
Well,
And-
yesterday night you guys got a good sneak peek of what the hell I think of her. She's duplicitous and horrible.
Right? So let's see what more she has to say.
Unless the regulation.
Let's kick it back a few seconds.
Again,
Get
remember
the full thought out of her.
All over there.
She's formerly a member of the Jackson 5, right? You know, because her last name's Jackson.
Oh, is that?
She was the female in the background that was like dancing around or something. I don't know what the hell.
Oh, I think I remember her from RESPECT.
No, that's not a Jackson 5 song.
Oh, that's Aretha Franklin. Excuse the hell out of me. Okay, let's stop.
Yes,
confusing
excuse
black-
the hell out of yourself,
Black
yes.
artists with our horrible racism, American shirts.
Oh, you guys.
Let's get back to this big mama chocolate pedo bear.
So far as
Allegedly, right?
There can be
No.
regulation of that right pre-viability, unless the regulation imposes an undue
Unless.
burden on the exercise of the right, and there can be regulation after viability, as long as there's exception for the health and I think maybe life of the mother. So it's the limitations are about whether and to what extent
That's a little loud.
the government can regulate the right.
Is it your understanding under the current precedent of the Supreme Court that there is a right to abortion up to and including the time of delivery of the child?
Senator, I don't know, actually. I mean, the Supreme Court in every case is looking at individual regulations of the government related to individual rights. And I am not aware of the court having made a pronouncement about whether or not regulation can extend all the way up until birth. I'm just not aware of that.
But you have no thoughts or feelings of that being extended all the way up to and until birth? That's kind of disgusting to even think of such a thing.
It's almost sociopathic. It's like you really don't care that there's a little thing squirming around in that belly right before birth? Really?
I mean, you know, I really don't. I mean, I've listened to a few podcasts and, you know, whatever videos about what they do when they say up to birth, and
Well, see, if the mother wants to resuscitate the child, we'll keep the baby comfortable, and then we'll
comfortable.
Yes, and then what we'll do is I'll put on my black face, and if it's a little black child, put on my KKK robe, and we'll do a little dance around, worship the devil, and then we'll kill it.
Come on now, what are you
Allegedly.
doing?
Allegedly.
No, I mean, I've heard of slitting voice box to not hear a cry.
Oh yeah, they do all sorts of. I mean,
God,
everything. You just you think of it disgusting, and they do it.
See, look at this. All these people, look at his face. All these people know what the fuck they're thinking. Like you know what the hell they're thinking. These guys don't want her in there. None of these people want to see her go in there. They know she's going to be bad for this country, but they're just freaking, grimacing and bearing it? Why? Call her the fuck out right now. I'm sick of this waiting shit. Like, how long are we going to just sit around while these guys ruin our country? We need to take action, not freaking wait. Not freaking...
We find out tomorrow, really. What?
It's freaking awful.
And that it's because the court is looking at individual cases and making its rulings in the context of individual cases and not making sort of pronouncements in general.
So you are suggesting that in some individual case, the right to abortion could extend through the entire pregnancy up until the time the child is delivered?
No, Senator, I'm suggesting that I'm not aware of any case that's handled the issue.
You can't decide for yourself?
That, you think that you believe Roe...
Hold on a second. I have a doggy problem. I'll be right back.
Okay, that's fine. We're gonna continue on. We're gonna continue on. Oh, okay, so I'm gonna go back 5 seconds so that we get that thought back from her again, because I had a thought that came to my head.
Oh my goodness. I love when thoughts come to my head.
You told us that you think that you believe Roe versus Wade and Casey are precedents, and we talked a little bit about some of the questions about whether it's a super precedent.
Okay, false alarm.
How the fuck is Roe versus Wade a precedent? I'm sorry, what?
The Supreme Court's decision in the Heller case.
I am.
And that was a decision by the United States Supreme Court that recognized the individual right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment, correct?
Yes.
Is that a precedent of the court?
It is.
And you would respect that precedent?
Yes, Senator. All precedents of the Supreme Court have to be respected.
Liar.
Is it as...
That is a lie. Because we'd have to go back to the...
in terms of...
You'd have to go back to day one. You'd have to go back to day one, but she was actually saying some shit that contradicted that. Because she would directly go against the Supreme Court when dealing with pedophiles and their sentencing time.
Well, the sentencing time was decided that it would be up to the judge's discretion.
Not by the Supreme
Court. Congress
though.
passed a law that said that they would have to, that this is the maximum sentence, this is minimum sentencing, and she put some of them even below minimum sentencing.
Wait, was it Congress and then the Supreme Court said you can do as you like, or how did that work?
Congress passed a law said that they have to be locked up X amount of time, maximum X amount of time minimum, and then the Supreme Court says, okay, that's fine, but the judge has to have discretion as to what period in time between this and maybe even a little less. I don't know. I don't think that's very legal, but what she did, I think she gave them much less than even the minimum standard, which again, how legal is that? But that was what was talked about yesterday, was that Congress passed a law, said that there has to be a minimum this time, maximum this time.
Yeah,
the judge has to have discretion as to okay, what time do they get? What time?
Cruz goes through that stuff again. He kind of brings that scorecard back up or whatever, and writes down those percentages again.
Frickin' Ted and all his plans. This better get her kicked out of here, I swear, bro. Like,
that's precedent.
I agree.
To Roe versus Wade, or would you evaluate it differently?
I'm not aware of any ranking or grading of precedents. All precedents of the Supreme Court are entitled to respect on an equal basis.
Get Ben.
I agree with you. That's why it kind of blows my mind when people talk about super precedents, as if somehow one precedent was
okay, the doggy alarm is officially off. I'll be right back.
Significance or priority under the Constitution than others. In the short period of time I have remaining, let me just revisit with you some of the questions we talked about yesterday with regard to free exercise of religion. And of course, that's recognized explicitly under the United States Constitution, the First Amendment, correct?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the cases that have been litigated before the Supreme Court of the United States involving the Little Sisters of the Poor with regard to the Affordable Care Act mandate on contraception coverage?
Yes.
Now, the Little Sisters of the Poor are a benevolent group of nuns. I think there are about 300 of them that take care of elderly and infirm individuals. And of course, as a matter of their religious beliefs, as documented in the court's opinions, they don't believe in either contraception or abortion. Do you agree with that?
No, she
I
doesn't
believe
agree with that.
was described in the case that you're talking about.
I think that's right.
I believe it was described in the case that you're talking about.
It's like she doesn't want to answer that question, obviously.
Because obviously she believes in, too many things that are just disgusting. She needs to stop. Pedophilia.
Like, what? Okay, if her people are really seeing this, they're gonna think that she's not representing them enough. They're gonna be like, "Why is she standing up for what we believe in?" It's like, because what you believe in is fuck.
That's what I would think is that she'd want these people to actually stand up for what you actually believe in. It's like, stand up, get
It's
up
like,
in
no,
there.
she's trying to hide all of it. Way in the background. What's up with that?
Yes.
Yeah. And so when the Affordable Care Act mandated that every health insurance policy contain coverage for contraception or chemically induced abortions, they objected and said that this violated their conscience and their free exercise of religion rights under the First Amendment, right?
I believe so,
Right.
yes.
Well, after the Obama administration, during the Trump administration, the Trump administration expanded the regulations to allow not only churches, but also religious organizations like the Little Sisters of the Poor a waiver from that contraception and abortion-inducing drug mandate. Do you recall that?
Yes.
I mean, mandate. That word is just so strong.
Yeah.
When-
Especially after the word abortion.
Right. Inducing drug mandate.
Abortion
You're
mandate.
mandated to get an abortion if certain circumstances are come to play. Screw you. Get away from me.
Are you familiar with the fact that President Biden has said restore?
He's like, wait a minute, is that right?
Did I pick the right president? Oh.
Excuse me. Yeah, President Biden has said he would restore.
Yeah, think about it. He's like,
and was promulgated under the Obama administration and exclude organizations like the Little Sisters of the Poor from that waiver potential for abortion drugs or contraception coverage?
I am not aware of that, Senator.
Not aware much, are you, bitch?
What all this boils down to, Congress passed a bill called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which tried to make sure that people's sincerely held religious beliefs could be accommodated under their First Amendment rights, as opposed to Congress mandating things that would violate their conscience and violate their religious beliefs. Do you agree with me that it's important to accommodate the sincerely held religious beliefs of all Americans when it comes to legislation that the Congress may pass?
Back.
Thank you, Senator.
In black.
Religious
I hit the
freedom
stack.
is.
I am black. What the hell? I'm just kidding. What?
Are you
I
wearing
might be.
digital blackface? Ooh.
Ooh.
Naughty, naughty.
Chocolate.
Thank you,
Your
Senator.
black ass.
Religious freedom is a core foundational constitutional
Koolfrogg,
right.
I think that was kind of racist there.
It's in the First Amendment of the Constitution and reflects the founding fathers'
Says the woman who teaches 1619.
understanding of this country as being one that is based on, in large part, the idea of pluralism, the idea that people can come and have
I'm gonna
Do not come.
held religious beliefs.
Oh my God, we had the
them,
same thought.
Without persecution. That's part of the foundational foundation of our government and the amendment that you're discussing. And as a result, that right is protected in many ways. You mentioned the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Congress has enacted a statute that, when it comes to federal regulation, if there's a substantial burden placed on religion, then the strict scrutiny standard applies.
I agree. I have 1 minute, so I have one more
Yes.
question. I agree with what you just said.
Yes.
So
It's not a question.
Yes, I got that right.
Have asked this question or made this point of some of your predecessors who sat in the same chair and expressed my concern about some of the court's establishment law, establishment jurisprudence. I don't want to leave you out of that concern. When I was Attorney General of Texas, I had a chance to argue a case in front of the United States Supreme Court and called Santa Fe Independent School District versus Doe. This was a lawsuit brought by the ACLU, which sought to enjoin or prevent a student-led prayer before football games at the Santa Fe Independent School District right outside of Houston. In the end, 5 judges said that violated the Establishment Clause of the Constitution, causing Chief Justice Rehnquist to write in his dissent that the Constitution mandates neutrality toward religion, not hostility, but that the court's decision evidenced hostility towards religious expression, leaving me to conclude that the public square, we can talk about everything from violence to misogyny to sex, you name it, but we can't talk about sincerely held religious beliefs. I would just footnote that for you and plant the seed for what it's worth. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. Welcome to Majority Leader Schumer.
I love
You're with
Buffalo
us.
Springfield.
And he would report if he could.
The problem is, though, if you plant a seed in bad ground, it's never going to grow.
And if you plant a seed in a bad pussy, it's never gonna grow. Because abortion.
Oh. Oh.
You like how I did that there?
Oh.
A challenge to finish our hearing today at a time when we can go to the floor for a series of votes, which will end the day. So we want to.
And I believe, I'm not positive, I believe they do not make it to the vote.
Oh my fucking gosh. I cannot handle these people's incompetency.
So then, we're going to jump forward. While I jump forward, we didn't really show ourselves out at the beginning of the show. If you both would like to show yourself out real quick, while I'm getting to the next area of this clip, you can totally do that.
Well, of course, you can go to americashirtsarefirst.com. That's americashirtsarefirst.com, the most based t-shirts on the planet. You get 15% off any shirt in the store with the discount code Koolfrogg. 15% off any shirt in the store with the discount code Koolfrogg. You can also check my Rumble channel out. That is spelled America Shirts, as you see on the screen in front of you. Capital A, capital S. Type it into Rumble. You'll find it.
Beautiful. He is super base content. Check him out.
Indeed, I do.
I am, of course, Jimmy YouTube. You can follow me here on YouTube at Jimmy YouTube, or you can follow me over on TikTok Odyssey, or Rumble, all at the Atlas Pass. Or you can follow me on Twitter at RealAnimeRich with underscores and capitalization.
I was trying to match the person that was up there, but it didn't really work. It kind of delayed while I was trying to pull it, whatever. Either way, and I am Koolfrogg. I am the one and only Koolfrogg. You can go to a linktree/Koolfrogg. That's KOLFROGG. If you want to support me immediately, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Koolfrogg. That being said, I did get to the next clip or area of the clip. I mean, they were there for a whole 11 hours today.
Oh
so
my gosh.
yeah, they second day of sitting through this lady. Come on. Through this lady, I tell you. So, Senator Lee. We're going to listen to a couple different people today as opposed to just listen to the same people.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
About how long are we listening today?
I want to talk next.
Oh, we might be here for a while. If you want to need or want to jump out, whatever, however, just kind of say something.
Versus United States Department of the Interior. It was decided.
I'll let you know when I'm feeling antsy.
Issued in 2015 while in the federal district court. I know you've handled a lot of cases.
Ants. Sorry.
I've got ants, people.
I got ants.
And imagine that by triggering the case name, that would necessarily bring it back. But this case involved
gay little ants.
A challenge to an administrative
gay little ants.
Issues bearing on coal mining within the state of West Virginia. There were two parallel challenges brought against that administrative action. One in a federal district
I'm a frog, so
West
dinner.
Virginia, where the land in question was located, and another in the U.S. District Court.
Do frogs have dinner with ants?
The government defending itself.
Or do they make dinner of ants?
By,
that's better.
Some environmental groups asked that you dismiss the D.C. case so that the matter could be litigated in West Virginia. You denied that. Can you, based on my description of the facts, does that ring any...
Okay, now that this went through my head, I really don't want to think about gay little ants that I'm eating anymore, so we're good.
Bells, and can you tell me why you might have denied it?
Scrumptious. Let's get them on up in there.
It sounds like
bad
dozens of cases that I handled with similar issues and
what's that sound that Yoshi makes?
Something like a motion to dismiss is early in the action.
Sure.
And so denying a motion to dismiss is pretty routine. District of Columbia.
I understand, and I'm sure you handled a lot of those all the time as
yes,
a district judge.
All the time. Oh my gosh.
The reason I raise it is just because it relates indirectly to some concerns that I've got that are somewhat unique to the Western United States. We have a lot of cases that involve the U.S. Department of the Interior and agency actions taken relative to the public land that we have. In every state east of Colorado, the federal government owns less than 15% of the land. In most of those, it's much less than 15%, in the single digits or low single digits. In every state, Colorado and west of Colorado, the federal government owns more than 15% of the land, and most of the time, it's a lot more. In my state, it happens to be about 2/3 of the land that's owned by the federal government. As a result, it complicates our ability to do just about everything we do, whether it's recreation, construction, oil and gas development, whether it's just accessing people's farms and ranches, or even something as simple as trying to fund local fire, police, search and rescue operations. All these things are affected by the excessive ownership of federal land by the federal government and the way it's often managed. Sometimes decisions made at the federal level are challenged in parallel actions like these. One in the forum state, in the host state to where the action is happening, another in D.C. And I'm always concerned about forum shopping And I'm sure that's something you watched out for as a judge and saw forum shopping from time to time. It's also something that touches on an issue that involves statutory interpretation. There's something called the Antiquities Act, passed 110 years ago or so, designed to give presidents of the United States the authority to designate parcels of federal land as national monuments. The text of the statute states that the limits of the parcels in question should be, quote, confined to the smallest area compatible with the proper care and management of the objects to be protected. Now, given that these presidential proclamations tend to be broad, it's sometimes the objects to be protected are also broad. And as a result of that, it's difficult to tell what the limits are. Do you have any reaction as to how we could discern that, how we could define any meaning out of that? It's got to mean something. The text of the statute, you try not to leave language simply unaddressed or meaningless in a statute. Do you have any thoughts on how a statute like that, saying that it should be confined to the smallest area compatible with the proper care and management of the objects to be protected? Any thoughts briefly on that?
Well, Senator.
That was kind of a confusing question because he kind of asked it twice.
If I were presented with a case with that statute and that circumstance, I would proceed as I always have. You would have to understand the parties' arguments about the particulars in the case. What does the presidential proclamation say? To what does it relate? Whether there are any precedents in this area that further define or further address what Congress intended with respect to the statute at issue.
And I would assume that it would also matter if the government's lawyers defending the president's action made an argument that would leave the interpretation open-ended and meaningless.
Well, as part of your interpretive exercise, as you're considering the parties' various arguments, one that did not account for all the words in a statute would be one that you would
Excellent.
Not
It,
might not agree with.
No, I get it. And this is one of the things that I've appreciated about what you've told us in these hearings.
Oh my gosh.
I really like
the covering
the way
for her, you
described the
ass.
fact it's important to construe the text that you're asked to interpret.
Brilliant.
And interpreting that, you look at
fuck
the language,
off.
and you're endeavoring to figure out the original public meaning. And I think that is a very helpful thing.
Is there background noise?
Let's
Can you hear a
move
lot
to
of
a different issue.
Just
it's that little fan that you got going.
Oh,
you're okay. You can go for a little while. I'll let you know.
I thought I heard somebody scrubbing a pan.
A moment ago. Now you clerked.
Nah, he's got a
on the
little
US
like
Supreme
metal
Court for
fan or
Justice
something.
Breyer in October term 1999. Is that right?
That is right.
That was the same, and you clerked for Justice Breyer.
I did.
And that was the same year that the Supreme Court issued its decision in a case called Stenberg versus Carhart. This is the case where the Supreme Court of the United States struck down a Nebraska law prohibiting partial birth abortion, and in the absence of circumstances where the baby posed a threat to the life of the mother. Now, to be clear, the law prohibited a procedure where the abortionist causes an unborn baby to be partially delivered by the mother, and then the abortionist intentionally kills the baby outside the womb by puncturing its skull with scissors and then collapsing the skull.
Jesus, what the
this
fuck?
is gruesome, and I don't like having to quote this, but it is relevant to the topic we're covering here. Justice Kennedy described it this way in chilling terms when in his dissent, when he describes the fact that when scissors are inserted into the back of the head, the fetus's body, wholly outside the woman's body and alive, reacts as though startled and then goes limp.
It's so very disturbing that anyone would think that this is okay. there are people out in this world that can't have and that would gladly take care of those children. If there are other options than doing what he's actually explaining.
Well,
And
boys, I gotta peace out here.
All right. You have a good night.
Hey, you too. Thank you for having me on.
Yep.
Later there, Jimmy.
Later, guys.
Justice Scalia, in his great eloquence, lamented the ruling, but also expressed optimism for the fact that future courts would get it right, saying, quote, "I'm optimistic enough to believe that one day Stenberg versus Carhart will be assigned to its rightful place in the history of this court's jurisprudence, beside Korematsu and Dred Scott. This method of killing a human child, one cannot even
Dred Scott. That was
say
the slave
an
decision that I was
entirely
talking about
unborn
earlier.
Human child. Prescribed by
sure,
the statute
sure.
is so horrible that the most clinical description of it evokes a shudder of revulsion." We then saw a few years later the Supreme Court of the United States issue a different ruling. The Supreme Court issued a different ruling in a case called Gonzalez v. Carhart. Gonzalez v. Carhart upheld a different statute. This one was federal rather than state, but it was a different federal statute that also prohibited partial birth abortion. Judge Jackson, can you distinguish these cases for me? What was the difference between Gonzalez v. Carhart, where the partial birth abortion ban in question was upheld, whereas in Stenberg v. Carhart, it was invalidated?
Thank you, Senator. I don't have the opinions in front of me. I think it had.
You're going on the Supreme Court and you don't know Supreme Court
the
rulings?
method of extraction, the
Of course he
fact
doesn't.
finding related to the procedure. In one case, the district court had made some findings, and the court felt bound by them. And another, there was considerations beyond those that were previously relied upon. So there were distinctions that the court looked at and considered in the cases. But yes.
Let's talk about court packing for a minute.
Yes.
This is the reason that I wanted to play him, was because of this whole part right here. This whole quote-unquote court packing.
One of the reasons court packing concerns me, one of the many reasons, is because it's not prohibited in the first instance. It's not prohibited by the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that Congress may not change the size of the Supreme Court. There's no limitation on that. We have, for 152 years, stuck with the number 9.
I mean, we used to have 3 Supreme Court justices.
And in the absence of an argument saying that
They can shrink the size of it to just one person.
Right.
They can expand it. I mean,
I should find the clip of Joe Biden yelling at this
to imagine why it would
at,
be a good idea to change,
at the point of
particularly because if you increase the size of the court,
Roosevelt
in
being
one fell swoop,
doing a boneheaded idea of packing the courts.
allowing one president, the current president, to have a
I played that video before. I might still have that video. Maybe I should look to see if I have that.
It tends to be more politically contentious. It can turn the court into a political football of sorts. Given the fact that our Supreme Court justices,
as though it's not already a political football.
Once you do that, it becomes something of a one-way ratchet, always expanding, never contracting. Before long, you could see an increasingly larger court, with the court expanding each time a different party secures the coveted circumstance of a majority in the House, majority in the Senate, and controlled by the same party of the White House. And so this is why it concerns me. I understand that why it is that the canons of judicial ethics don't allow you to comment on matters that might come before you. This is one that could not come before you as a justice. This is a non-justiciable political question. It's committed to the 2 political branches of government. There's not even a constitutional challenge that could lie to it, even though it would undermine the separation of powers in the Constitution as I see it. It's not unconstitutional. So it couldn't and it would never come before you. Last night when you were asked a question by my colleague, Senator Kennedy, on this, you acknowledged that you have an opinion. Did I understand that right? You have an opinion on court packing?
Senator, I have a lot of opinions. I have opinions on I'm a human being, and I have an opinion on a lot of things.
No shit.
Do you? Because last night there was a couple times where you said that you didn't have an opinion on certain things.
Well, yes, there's that too. I don't have a political philosophy.
She doesn't have an opinion on if she knows what a woman is.
The reason why, in my view, it is not appropriate for me to comment is because of my fidelity to the judicial role. I understand that it's a political question, and that is precisely why I think that I am uncomfortable speaking to it.
No, I understand that, and I respect the impulse. I respect the overall issue, and I think it's better for Article 3 judges and justices ordinarily not wade into the political thicket. This one I do think is different because, number one, as I say, it can never come before you. Number two, it does have an impact on what you would be doing, and you also as an Article 3 judge, someone who's served for nearly 9 years as a federal judge, you've developed experience and intuition and a thorough understanding of our federal court system, and that's why I think your perspective on it would be valuable. The reason it concerns me so much is that even when court packing doesn't succeed legislatively, it can leave an impact. The last time this was attempted was in 1937. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was upset at the Supreme Court on a number of bases. He didn't like the then 32-year-old precedent of Lochner versus New York, where the 5 conservatives on the Supreme Court engaged in an active judicial activism, reading something into the Constitution that wasn't really there. Some people disagree with me on this, but it wasn't there. And they imposed that. But the bigger reason was he didn't like the court's interpretation of the Commerce Clause. It was that interpretation of the Commerce Clause, the one we discussed yesterday, Prior to 1937, you had the Supreme Court agreeing as far as the channels and instrumentalities of interstate commerce that we talked about yesterday. You had the court more or less in agreement over time as to the impact of the Dormant Commerce Clause. But as to the substantial effects test, that didn't exist yet. It required something much closer to an interstate commercial transaction in order for Congress's Commerce Clause authority to kick in. There were the so-called 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as FDR affectionately called them, 4 conservatives who were consistently pushing for limits on Congress's authority. And then you had other justices who would sometimes join with them. Usually that included Justice Owen Roberts, who had stood with them in maintaining narrower authority for Congress under the Commerce Clause. All that changed when on April 12, 1937, 2 weeks to the day when the case often associated with the so-called switch in time that changed 9, the West Coast Hotel versus Parrish, where they undid the Lochner precedent. April 12, 1937, the Supreme Court decided a case, NLRB versus Jones and Laughlin Steel, that forever changed, magnified, expanded the Commerce Clause in a way that, had it been through a constitutional amendment, it would be among the most significant, impactful constitutional amendments ever adopted, and yet it's rarely discussed. This case resulted from one vote, one person on the Supreme Court who changed his vote, Associate Justice Owen Roberts. It's widely believed, and I believe it based on what I've researched on it, he was influenced heavily by FDR's court packing plan. He didn't want to be on a court that was packed. He convinced himself that he made that switch in order to save the court as it was. And that has changed everything. It's led to a much bigger, more expensive, more intrusive federal government. We can disagree as to the policy merits of that, but it did change the Constitution. That's why I worry about that. So I hope, I understand you don't want to answer it. I hope that between now and the end of the day, you'll see fit to tell us what your opinion is. I do think it's worth discussing. Let's talk for a minute. Got just moments left. I want to get back to your sentencing approach. Now, when you approach these child pornography cases, what you're describing in many circumstances is an overall concern that you've got with the sentencing guidelines, and particularly that portion of the sentencing guidelines that deals with child pornography cases. This showed up in the transcripts of some of your sentencing hearings, including the transcript of your sentencing hearing in the Hawkins case. I turn to that to page 38, lines 17 to 24 of that transcript, and here's something you say in that Hawkins case. And I believe this was the 18-year-old defendant that you sentenced to 3 months in prison, when the lower end of the guidelines range
Yes,
would have been 97,
this is the one.
The higher end would have been in the 120s or something like that. You said, and in your case, this is you speaking to Mr. Hawkins, in your case in particular, I don't feel that it is appropriate necessarily to increase the penalty on the basis of your use of a computer or the number of images or prepubescent victims, as the guidelines require, because these circumstances exist in many cases, if not most, and don't signal an especially heinous or egregious child pornography offense. I've got a couple of questions about that. Were those, you start out that paragraph sounding like you're making a determination as to him, but then the observations you make in that paragraph seem to apply broadly. Is that right? So,
Senator, I don't have the transcript of Mr. Hawkins' case. I recall that I found that case, like all child pornography cases, to be difficult, really difficult. And his case, I recall, was in many ways
Why is it difficult?
an outlier in
Guilty or not
terms
guilty?
of the various
Have the evidence on him.
considerations that
Punishment.
Congress required.
Exactly. What's the difference? Why is it that us now that we're in a digital, as opposed to having mailed? Because that's pretty much what it comes down to. What her argument is it's no longer that you actually have photos. You actually have digital content, which can be duplicated and replicated, and you can have thousands easily. And that's where she's getting at. Is she's like, well, it wasn't right for his case, which still not the recommendation of the courts. She went totally against it, and she did her own thing. What
The
says that?
recommendation of Congress.
And it's not that she's wrong for doing what she had done at all. My thought on it is how are you going to, if this is the way you're going to treat somebody, how are you going to treat the rest of the, when you get into this when and if, I hope to God she doesn't, when she gets into this seat, what she would actually do to the United States. Because if she's willing to hand down whatever to, whoever, whenever, for whatever reason, what says that she's not going to continue to do so?
Well, she'll pimp us out to George Soros like the rest of them. Yeah, that's all she knows how to do.
Into account.
But there were
The rest of the
prepubescent
George
victims
Soros hack
that
case,
were
I should
at
say.
stake in
I
that.
don't remember how many. I don't remember the circumstances of his actual crime. What I will say is that, consistent with Supreme Court case law and Congress's statute in this area, judges have to take into account a number of factors and the guidelines, which are no longer I won't say not mandatory. You have to calculate the guidelines. They're no longer binding. And the Supreme Court has said that under the statutory scheme, judges have discretion.
But I'm almost out of time.
Yes.
Here. I want to make the point.
Yes.
Hawkins.
Wait, but she keeps saying that Congress is the one that made it the way that it is. Now she's saying the courts did.
Specifically asked for images of 11 to 17-year-olds. So I don't understand how that can be an instance where that shouldn't matter, and where the fact that he did it with a computer hardly atones for what he was doing. Hardly.
How many
offsets the
times
fact
do you
that
think
he's
they
seeking
talked to Hawkins
and
this week?
obtain
Now that his name's kept
prepubescent
several
child pornography
times.
images. Nor does the fact that the images become easier over time to transmit,
Hawkins?
and receive, and store because of computers.
This guy that
I
had,
actually think
because
it
he's
cuts in
out.
precisely the opposite direction that you described.
Oh, yeah.
It makes it more severe, not less.
How many
And I
times
see
do you
this as
think
an
somebody
aggravated
has
and that
talked to
is
this
a great concern to me.
Hawkins this week?
I've exceeded my time.
Since or in the last few days, since he's actually been talked about so much.
Senator, as in every child pornography case
And she's probably having an affair with him with a young
that I sentenced, I considered
person in the middle, maybe?
all
Maybe not
of
allegedly.
the evidence, all of the relevant factors. It is
That was a big
not the same
speculative
exercise
thought that you had there.
to look at a transcript, to think about
It's all allegedly, folks.
guidelines, to not have in front of you the individuals, the victims, the pictures, the circumstances that trial judges have to review in these cases or any cases. I understand, Senator, that there are some questions about records, etc. Courts have all of the evidence, and courts have all of the recommendations of various parties, and courts have, under Congress's authority, the responsibility of using our judgment to make determinations that are sufficient but not greater than necessary to comply with the purposes or promote the purposes of punishment, taking into account things like unwarranted sentencing disparities. And it may seem like an easy exercise. It may seem in retrospect, when you look back at a few pieces of data, that courts have not done what it is that they are supposed to do. But what I can assure you is that I took every one of these cases seriously in my duty and responsibility as a judge, and I made my determinations in light of the seriousness of the offense, the nature and circumstances of the offense, the history and characteristics of the defendant, the need for the sentence imposed to promote various purposes of punishment, and all of the other factors that Congress prescribed.
Okay, but you keep resetting that standard, and yet you specifically excluded from consideration the fact that he had requested and obtained images, prepubescent child pornography images.
Senator, I didn't exclude it. I didn't exclude it. What I did was I looked at the guidelines, which is what the Supreme Court requires, and I was making policy determinations as the Supreme Court says that judges are to do.
Look at page 38 of your transcript. It looks to me like you excluded it, and your action sentencing him to 3 months for one of the most heinous offenses imaginable. Keep in mind, because these are transmitted electronically.
So now Dick's gonna get into it, and he's like, "Okay, now we're going over time." And I mean, it's really seriously the woman
Dick.
just, yeah, right. The woman just needs to actually answer the question and just be truthful. Why are you doing it?
She did with Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz played the lawyer part right, and he made her hang herself to the point where she said, "Yes, I stand by that decision." Now she won't say it again.
He's next. So,
like she didn't say it again the entire time yesterday or today.
Of their lives.
We're asking everyone to try to
whether you stay with me or not, we got
next is Senator
some show to go.
Before recognizing her, I'd like to ask consent to enter into the record a support letter for Judge Jackson from 48 former federal prosecutors in South Florida. Without objection, Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin. Welcome back, Judge Jackson. Yesterday, you and I discussed the court's increasing reliance on issuing unsigned orders.
What was that? Did you see that?
Oh, what? Someone place a paper there?
The token. The token in the background.
Prosecutors in South Florida.
She's looking right at the camera.
Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin.
And she gets
Welcome
up and
back,
she walks away.
Judge Jackson. Yesterday,
Do they go sit
you and I
down quick?
discussed the court's
He has something to
increasing
say.
reliance on issuing unsigned orders on its shadow docket. And less than an hour ago,
That's the left staging things for you.
the court once again used the shadow docket to throw out Wisconsin's redistricting maps.
Oh,
And-
we're not listening to Klobuchar. We're going to jump ahead.
Now, if she was eating a salad with a comb in the middle of this would be a lot more interesting.
They go on break right after she's done.
Now, with her comb in her hand, she goes to the lunch bar and grabs a salad. By the way,
yeah,
that means she's nuts.
Welcome back, Judge. As you can see, things get off the rails here when they decide to have a floor vote. We'll do our best to stick with the program and finish this
Of course you do.
proper way. The next up is Senator Cruz of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Under Article 3 of the Constitution, federal
Oh,
courts
peppy
have
are we?
jurisdiction over only cases and controversies, which means under the Constitution it has to be an actual dispute, that federal courts cannot simply issue advisory opinions on a question they may have a view on. And one component of Article 3 jurisdiction is the requirement of standing, that in order for a plaintiff to have standing to bring a case, that plaintiff, at least generally speaking, must have a real and concrete injury. Is that right?
That is correct.
So, for example, that means that even if I might have a disagreement with some particular policy or some particular law, that I can't bring a case unless I am personally aggrieved by that policy or that law. So, for example, you're in my alma mater, Harvard, is currently being sued for its explicit and, in my view, egregious policy of discriminating against Asian Americans. Even though I think that policy is egregious, I, as an individual plaintiff, could not bring a lawsuit challenging it because I am not Asian American. Is that right?
If you brought a lawsuit, the court would have to evaluate whether you had an actual injury in order to be able to determine whether it had subject matter jurisdiction to hear the suit.
But if I'm not in the class being discriminated against, then I don't have the ability to bring the lawsuit. Is that right?
I think you'd have to have an actual injury. Certainly people, I think, who are in the class could claim that they had an injury for that purpose.
So now you're on the Board of Overseers of Harvard. If you're confirmed, do you intend to recuse from this lawsuit?
That is my plan, Senator.
Okay. We discussed yesterday how the standard for race
Is that what you're going to do?
strict scrutiny. The court has laid out a different standard for gender discrimination. What is the constitutional standard that applies to gender discrimination?
Gender discrimination, the court has held intermediate scrutiny applies, which is that the government has to have an important interest, and the tailoring doesn't have to be as narrow.
Right. So yesterday, under questioning from Senator Blackburn, you told her that you couldn't define what a woman is, that you were not a biologist, which I think you're the only Supreme Court nominee in history who's been unable to answer to question what is a woman. Let me ask you, as a judge, how would you determine if a plaintiff had Article 3 standing to challenge a gender-based rule, regulation, policy, without being able to determine what a woman was?
So, Senator, I know that I'm a woman. I know that Senator Blackburn is a woman, and the woman who I admire most in the world is in the room today, my mother. It sounded as well, but the question was...
Let me ask, under the modern leftist sensibilities, if I decide right now that I'm a woman, and apparently I'm a woman, does that mean that I would have Article 3 standing to challenge a gender-based restriction?
Yes.
Senator, to the extent that you are asking me about who has the ability to bring lawsuits based on gender, those kinds of issues are working their way through the courts, and I'm not able to comment on them.
Okay, if I can change my gender, if I can be a woman, and then an hour later, if I decide I'm not a woman anymore, I guess I would lose Article 3 standing. Tell me, does that same principle apply to other protected characteristics? For example, I'm an Hispanic man. Could I decide I was an Asian man? Would I have the ability to be an Asian man?
This is great.
Challenge Harvard's discrimination?
I know, I love him. He's awesome.
Senator, I'm not able to answer your question. You're asking me about hypotheticals and...
She's just smiling like...
He's kind of like what you wanted Trump to actually be.
I would assess standing the way I assess other legal issues, which is to listen to the arguments made by the parties, consider the relevant precedents, and constitutional principles involved, and make a determination.
Okay, let's go back to your favorite topic of this hearing, which is the criminal law cases you had as a district judge, and in particular the cases involving child pornography. Now, your defenders, both on the Democratic side of the dais and also in the press, have suggested that the criticism that has been raised has been somehow cherry-picked, that it's only some specific examples. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to discuss each and every case you've had, because looking at your cases, and I've now examined all of the child porn cases you've had as a federal district judge, there is a very consistent pattern. So let's start, and by the way, I'm excluding the cases. So Senator Durbin and Senator Coons focused on...
See, this is much more effective than what Mike Lee
the
did.
Dickerson case, the Fife case, the Nguyen case, and the Hilly case. I'm excluding those because those are not child porn cases. Those are actual sexual assault of a child, which is markedly different. And I will concede when you're dealing with sexual assault, you have been willing to impose stricter penalties. So let's focus on actual child pornography cases. And let's go through each of them, because if it's right that we're cherry-picking, then you should be able to explain quite powerfully. Now, your justification is that you're following the statute, and as you know, 18 U.S.C. Section 3553 lays out the factors that as a district judge you had to consider in sentencing. And let's start with the Hess case, United States versus Hess. Now, in that case, a man sent 6 pictures of a prepubescent girl that he claimed was his daughter to an undercover law enforcement officer. Officers found over 600 images of child pornography, including images of sexual acts being performed on prepubescent children. The defendant pled guilty, and I believe in all of these cases the defendant pled guilty. So there's no question about guilt. They came in and pled guilty in your courtroom. The charge carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years and a mandatory maximum sentence of 20 years. The sentencing guidelines recommended 151 to 188 months sentence. The government, as part of a plea deal, agreed to argue for 60 months, but didn't agree that that would be the sentence, simply that they would advocate it. And you, in turn, sentenced Hess to 60 months. So, under the terms of the statute, why did you choose to sentence Hess to the absolute lowest possible sentence you were allowed to sentence under law?
Because...
Senator, I have spoken at length throughout this hearing about these cases. I've said what I'm going to say, which is I've taken every case seriously. These are
Do you have anything
very
to say about the Hess
horrible
case? I'm asking you
crimes,
specifically about the Hess
and
case.
I've taken every case seriously.
So you're not going to answer that?
These are very horrible crimes, as was that one. And as a mother, having to look at these pictures
Over and over and over again, the same bullshit.
Congress's directive, having to listen to recommendations like the government in that case, which argued for 60 months, I imposed the sentence that I believed was the sentence that was required by law.
So I believe you, and I've read your sentencing hearing in each one of these cases for which we have transcripts, and there are several of which we don't have transcripts. So in each of these cases, you read from the same script. So in each of these cases, you say that the distribution of child pornography is an extremely serious federal crime. And you point out that the crime involves people who are taking pictures and videos of real children while the children are being sexually abused. In Hess, you pointed out that he had hundreds of images of children in sexually compromised position. Some of them engaged in sadomasochistic acts. All of this I'm reading from you on the bench. And most importantly, the children in these pictures are not knowing and willing participants in the degrading conduct that was being depicted. They were being forced by someone off screen to commit unspeakable acts of sexual violence for the pleasure of the people filming them and for the gratification of people everywhere. And what concerns me is that many of those people have absolutely no shred of empathy for what that conduct does for the children who were being abused in this way. And you read this script in every one of these cases. So you talk about that these are terrible, terrible crimes. But you also, and in Hess, you said, I have to say that what I found particularly disturbing about your offense was that, quote, you apparently concocted a story about having photographed your own daughter, who you purportedly were willing to take pictures of to trade with other people. I know from your comments and from those who know you that you are unlikely to ever harm a child, which I find remarkable that you've got a child predator in your court who says, I'm unlikely to harm a child, and you say, well, you told me that, so clearly you're unlikely, but...
Yes. Clearly. That's awesome. I love how he actually puts that. Clearly. No, not clearly, because obviously the guy committed the crime. You just seen him. He's just sitting right in front of you, and you're gonna just. I'm so upset with this. They need to stop.
But you say, but in the context of the crime, you represented that you would. That in and of itself is astonishing. So you talk about it as astonishing. You nonetheless sentenced him to the very lowest possible sentence allowed under law. And what's striking is in these cases, in half of them in 5, you sentenced the defendant to the absolute lowest sentence under law. Let's look at another case. Let's look at United States versus Chazen. Now, Chazen is a particularly nasty case. In Chazen, the defendant was accused, accessed a Dropbox that contained 35 videos and 13 partially downloaded files of prepubescent minor females engaging in sexually explicit conduct. At least 3 of the instances of prepubescent female children were engaged in sexual activity with adult men.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Man should be able to get against the wall.
The images included the sexual abuse of children, including those as young as toddlers. And several of these cases that you had involved the sexual abuse of toddlers, which is truly horrifying. In this instance, Chazen pleaded guilty. The guidelines recommended a sentence of 78 to 97 months. The prosecution argued that should be what the sentence was. And you sentenced Chazen to just 28 months. Why did you sentence someone who had child pornography of toddlers being sexually abused to 28 months, 64% below what the prosecutors asked?
Thank you, Senator. You've picked out, 7, 8 cases. I've sentenced more than 100 people.
But not the child pornography.
And in every
These are your
case,
child porn cases.
in every case Senator, I look at
Yeah, see, that's what he's
evidence,
getting
I
to.
look at the recommendations of not just the government, because my duty as a judge is to consider all of the arguments that are made in a case. I look at the evidence. I talk to the defendants about the harms that they have engaged in. Many of these defendants are people who...
Okay, Judge, with respect, you're not answering my question. You're right. You talked to them about the harms. Let me read you again from what you said at the bench. You said in this instance, with Mr. Chazen, you said among the defendants nationwide who received a below-guideline sentence on the basis of a downward variance as opposed to a departure, the average sentences ranged from 84 to 92 months. So that's what you lay out as the average. Our Democratic colleagues say, well, other federal judges sentence below the guidelines. That is true. A number of federal judges do. Our Democratic colleagues have not pointed to a single federal judge in the country who 100% of the time sentences child porn defendants to markedly below what the prosecution has recommended, unless you have a mandatory minimum and no ability to do so. In this case, you say comparable defendants are sentenced to 84 to 92 months. Sentencing guidelines by statute require you to have similarly situated defendants sentenced to similar sentences, but you don't sentence Chazen to 84 to 92 months. You sentenced him to 28 months. Why?
Senator, I've said what I'm going to say about these.
And she has nothing better to say. She's not going to try to say anything better because she doesn't want people to actually know where she stands. Because if they know where exactly she stands, that's where they vote from.
Yep.
She's being told to do this. Oh, nice. Jimmy YouTube is back in spirit.
Oh.
I said it right this time.
No one case can stand in for a judge's entire record.
Okay, but I'm discussing every one of the cases. So if you're not going to explain it...
Senator, would you please let her respond?
No, not if she's not going to answer my question.
If you're just going to give a speech, then
you are not taking my time. If you want to filibuster, you're welcome to do so, but do it on your own.
I would at least give you an opportunity.
This is what Jimmy wants to hear, I think.
If she wants to answer the question, I asked her why she sentenced Chazen to 28 months when comparable defendants, in her own words, were sentenced to substantially higher, and she said she's not going to answer. Did you? I would welcome your answer, please.
Senator, I didn't say I'm not going to answer.
Okay, well,
I said my answer.
In this case, Chazen, why did you sentence him to just 28 months?
Senator, you're looking at the record. I don't have the record here. What I will say is that
Why do you need the record in front of you, lady? Though you've done hundreds of jobs, it doesn't matter. You should still remember this stuff. You comb through it. You're the one that actually listened to all of it. It's something that actually happened in your life. For the most part, you should still kind of maybe remember some of it.
But on top of that, she's in the middle of these hearings and stuff. She had a break yesterday, as did everybody else here. Why did she not go back and review it so she could answer the questions properly? Oh, wait, because she never planned on doing that. That's why.
Right.
And see, that's what Kickers is, pretty much putting out here, right? It's like, oh, okay, you're not going to answer the question at all. Okay, that's fine. Well, no, I never said that. Like, oh, really? Anyway.
Oh.
What happened?
Something.
What happened?
It won't play.
No.
Oh, everything just...
He broke the internet.
My answer...
Oh, there it goes.
There it is.
Why did you sentence him to just 28 months?
Senator, you're looking at...
Everything just refreshed.
Here, what I will say is that in every case, I looked at the recommendations of not only the government, but also the probation office, the defendant.
Yes, we know that, and you chose against all of it. Why did you? Is there a philosophy that guides you that would make you do such a pathological thing several different times? Oh, wait, no.
No, she has no philosophy.
The prosecutor says, I understand from my experience before Your
Even though
Honor,
she stated it before,
Your
as he
Honor's
pointed out. See, this is him
policy
laying it all out.
to the 2G2.2 sentencing guidelines. And he goes on to say, however, in this case in particular, the 4-point specific offense characteristic is justified because it contains sadomasochistic images of infants and toddlers. I'm trying to understand how you see someone that possesses images of infants and toddlers being sexually violated and you sentence them to 64% below what the prosecutor's asking for. You don't provide a justification other than a generic concern that the guidelines are too high. You don't provide a justification as required by statute. So I'm asking you to take the opportunity to explain to this committee and the American people why in 100% of the cases you have people with vile crimes, and you have language saying they're vile crimes, but then you sentence them to very, very low sentences. And why do you consistently 100% of the time choose to do that?
Yeah,
Senator, no
everybody's. She kiss everybody's.
I've sentenced more than 100 people. You have 8 or 9 cases in that chart.
Okay, Judge, you said that before. These are the 8 or 9 child porn cases. I will say, to correct the record,
I just say to the judge, there's no point in responding. He's going to interrupt you.
Thank you.
Look, I appreciate the chairman trying to filibuster, and if you don't like your witness's answers, you're welcome to provide your own. She is declining to answer the question, and Chairman Durbin, if you want to join her on the bench, you can. But Chairman Durbin, Chairman Durbin, I'm not interrupting your questioning.
I'm asking you to give her a chance to answer.
But she's consistently said she's not going to answer. I want to clarify for the record, by the way, the case I was discussing was Cooper and not Chazen. But Chazen is... the case that I was reading from your transcript was Cooper, but Chazen, all right, let's get to Chazen. I pulled the wrong tab. Chazen is equally horrifying, and you say in Chazen, this is something Senator Graham asked you. So the guidelines lay out different enhancements, and you say repeatedly, and this is true in all your cases, you say you disagree with the guidelines, you think they're wrong. And the 2 guidelines you disagree with is, one, there's an enhancement for use of a computer, and you say the world has changed, and now all of these are on a computer. And I understand that. I don't agree with you, but I understand that. That is a understandable thing to say. But the second thing you say over and over again is there's an enhancement for the number of images. And you say repeatedly, for example, in Chazen, you say, whatever the state of the law and technology at the time of the guidelines were first adapted, neither the use of the computer nor the number of images are especially aggravating factors today. Now, I find that bizarre. And you say it in every case. You say the number of images, it's not an aggravating factor, it doesn't matter, and you won't apply the enhancement. Do you really believe that a predator that has hundreds or thousands of images of hundreds or thousands of children being sexually violated has not committed an offense that is more serious than someone that has a single picture of a single child? A single picture of a single child is horrifying. But hundreds of children that have been violated, do you really believe that is not a more serious offense?
Senator, I did not have any cases involving hundreds of thousands of pictures.
No, I said hundreds or thousands. You had cases involving hundreds and you had cases involving thousands. You're right, you didn't have hundreds of thousands.
And I also applied an enhancement, just not to the degree of the guidelines.
You're right. It's a 5-point enhancement under the guidelines. You provide 2.
Yes, so not 0.
Okay,
not
right,
the suggestion that I did.
Are you suggesting the number of images doesn't matter? Because you say it in court over and over again that the number of images doesn't reflect that it's a more serious crime. Do you really believe that?
Senator, as I said to Senator Graham, the court is taking into account a number of circumstances. The commission has done a report about the operation of the guidelines, which enhancements actually reflect different levels of culpability with respect.
So let me ask you this, Judge. You've said the purpose of sentencing is to distinguish between crimes that are not as serious from truly egregious crimes. Is that right?
No, Senator.
So what is the purpose of sentencing if it's not to distinguish from less serious crimes from truly egregious crimes?
It is to assign proportional punishment. It is to do justice in cases where you have defendants who are convicted of the same conduct but have differing levels of culpability.
Well, I will
Kick
point out
stones, broad.
that you have a pattern. It doesn't matter how egregious the case is. Senator Hawley talked about the Hawkins case, where you had an 18-year-old with pictures of boys as young as 8 being sexually assaulted and raped, and you sentenced him to just 3 months in jail. And I will point out the Stewart case, the last one on this list, because we're running out of time. The Stewart case, you described that he had over 6,700 images and videos. So that's a lot, 6,700. That's a lot of kids being sexually assaulted. You have taken over a minute of my time, Mr. Chairman. So
you've been given extra time. You usually ask for it. You're given it.
Okay, I know you want to interrupt. I know you don't like this line of
play by the rules.
I know you like to interrupt.
I love their back and forth. Their back and forth is the best.
If you want to testify, you're welcome to.
Senator,
Judge,
you play by the same rules
in
as every other senator.
in the Stewart case, you said from the bench, thus, although this is not necessarily an atypical case, your child pornography possession crime was egregious in the court's view. Okay, so this is a bad one. If you're actually sentencing defendants, you said this was egregious. What did you sentence Stewart for? The guidelines said 97, 121 months. Prosecutor said 97 months. You said it's egregious. 6,700 images. You come in with 57
Time
months.
has expired.
Why
Senators
did you
use 2
sentence
minutes
him to
over the
just
allotted.
57 months in the Stewart case? Do you want to address that? Because you're claiming it's cherry picking. In fact, you're welcome to explain any of these cases, but let's take the Stewart case. Why
Senator Coons,
did you sentence him for half the amount?
you're not recognized, Senator. Senator
If
Coons,
you don't want her to answer that question?
you wouldn't allow her any.
Mr. Chairman, she may answer the question. I've asked
You
her
wouldn't
why
allow her
she said
anyway.
Stewart.
You've gone over the time, Senator, by 2 minutes.
Why
and
she's
a half.
because you've interrupted me for 2 minutes, Mr. Chairman. Will you
Yes.
allow her to answer the question? Or do you not want the American
Yes,
people to
right.
hear why, with someone she described as an
There
egregious
comes a point, Senator, where you get a little bit.
Chairman Durbin, will you allow her to answer the question?
You won't allow her to answer.
I will happily allow her to. The question is
Senator,
why
It's
did
so
you sentence
stupid.
Stewart, an egregious child pornography possessor,
So,
to
Judge Jackson.
half of the amount
Please, Senator.
requested by the prosecutor?
Please, Senator.
Will you allow her to answer the question, Chairman Durbin?
Senator Coons.
Why are you not
This isn't their last altercation.
not allowed her to answer the question?
You're
I'm not asking another question, but allow her to answer the question, Chairman Durbin.
Thank you, Chairman.
Why do you not want the American people to know what happened in the Stewart case, or any of these cases? Chairman Durbin, I've never seen the chairman refuse to allow a witness to answer a question. You can bang it as loud as you want.
Well, I can just tell you, at some point you have to follow.
Will you let her answer the question?
You can bang it as loud as you
By the way,
want.
with Senator Graham, it went 10 minutes over. You've taken a big chunk of the time. Will you allow her to answer the question?
You won't.
Why are you afraid of her? She's well to answer it right now. Will you let her? Will you let so no? You don't want her to answer the question?
No, Durbin's the child there, Jimmy. Durbin's the child. This is Ted, like, making sure that everybody knows what's going on.
No, I know. I just, yeah. You can hear him. You vote.
In this committee today are in the middle of a policy fight.
Oh, this guy's
It's my
the child
understanding
too, right?
That across this nation,
Okay, so we're not going to listen to this guy.
to impose sentences in cases
This
such
is
as the ones that
Coons.
have been so vigorously debated here.
I mean, though he has some good
depart
stuff,
downwards from the sentencing guidelines.
it's just
Yeah,
not.
Jeffrey Epstein has some good stuff on him too, allegedly, right?
Repeatedly and in detail. That's because a sentence.
Okay. The next guy, Mr. Sass. Mr. Sass comes in. So the Democrats did a good one, and they all kind of like, if we can actually, at the very, very beginning, he says something about just taking away 7 minutes of his own time because he doesn't need it or whatever, and he's hoping that others would actually follow in his leadership and cutting their time down by about 7 minutes. Yeah, exactly. Literally children. They all bicker like children. You're right, Jimmy, you too. That's exactly what it is. So
Well, it's childish because, like, again, Durbin just makes up the rules as he goes. It's like a kid trying to play a game of Monopoly, and like, you know, oh gee, sorry, you know, like this plot's worth this much now, so I'm just gonna take the money out and do whatever I want. It's like, now wait a minute, and like you just interrupted my turn. You just like flicked my piece off the board. It's like, oh nope. See, Mr. Cruz, you're the one that doesn't want to abide by the rules here. You see, because see, we changed the rules for us, and then we changed them back to the way they were just before, and then now we're going to change them back and change them back again. And then Cruz is like, what the hell? And then it's like, again, it just like this fight persists, right? That's the way they always do.
To speed up some of the time,
especially
I was listening to some of this or whatever. So we're gonna skip ahead into Sass's a little bit. We don't need to
Sass
listen to
the ass.
We don't need to listen to the whole thing that this guy has to say.
Shouting down other students or visiting.
Yes, no, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting
You're
that we do
against
differ.
canceling, I assume.
I'm not suggesting that we differ. What I'm
Which is
saying
why we teach critical race theories, because we like to shut people up, right?
about speech.
I mean, again, that's already been established. Like Ted Cruz already laid that out. Like she teaches this shit.
Right.
Well, not her directly, but you know, like she's a part of the school board, you know. So like, I mean, she initiates the whole process of teaching all the kids critical race theory, right? So like, I mean, we already know this. Like, she literally teaches hate and cancellation of everybody. And of course, Sass is an ass. He's not going to call any of that out at all.
I marked it for some reason to actually watch after this moment, whatever, because I thought whatever he said was interesting for something. I don't know.
That are working their way, you know, in different
And I wish
formats.
one of the senators would just sit there after all of their questions that they ask and they're trying to get in and they're trying to get across to the American people, as Ted Cruz said himself, like, oh, so you don't want the American people to know. See what I'm saying? Like, it's trying to get to the American people so that they can contact their senators and harass the hell out of them, whatever. That kind of thing. I really do wish that someone at this point in time now, during this second part, or no, this is the third part, actually just sit there and just call out all the bullshit at the end. You've proven your points. You've made the points. Now, Ted Cruz was kind of doing that, right? Like, he was like, okay, you said this. Let's do it. And he was calling her out. But at the same time, I would really like for someone to just now, at this point in time, everything's been laid out. Everything's been established. We all know what she does. Now just go point by point and just be like, you lied here, you lied here, you lied here, you lied here, you lied here. Everything's already been laid out. Let's put the pedal to the metal at this point. And of course, Ben Sass here is not going to do anything like that, because Ben Sass is an ass. He's secretly a jackass, you know. Again, you know, Democrats, you know, being, you know, their emblem being the jackass, right? So, you know. Hey.
Right. Okay, let's see what her answer was here.
About speech on campus and the like, or the kinds of things that are issues that are working their way, you know, in different formats.
And yeah, exactly. This is what Jimmy YouTube's been saying for the last 2 days.
Okay.
Hang her verbally.
Yes, now they need to do that. He's proven the case. Now she needs to hang. Yeah. You know, figuratively, of course.
Lots of kids, students, maybe some bound for the law, but more broadly, students across the country. And I think it's in America's public interest for them to hear you as an advocate for the full, vigorous.
It's the problem, though. We only got like 1 or 2 senators that actually are willing to do anything, and everybody else is just like, oh, she's so wonderful.
Vigorous and robust debate. I don't see
they only got so much time, and they want to try to get everything out. But yeah, again.
I'm gonna just assume we're mostly aligned on this.
I think that's a fair assumption.
Thank you.
Oh my God!
Before I move on, just because we've had
that smile.
Members of this committee comment on cameras in the court.
Just stick a carrot in that mouth and go, "What's up, Doc?" Like, you know.
There are a lot of times, but if I can give it.
Speaking of Ben Sass.
Friend of the court brief in advance, because I think when you're on the court and you all continue to debate this issue, I think it should be a decision for the Supreme Court to make about whether
Ben Sass is the Adam Kinzinger of the Senate. That's literally who he is.
To make for Article 3.
Yeah, he really is.
Incredibly important for us to recognize, because I
except for he doesn't cry as much.
My colleagues on this who are
openly
for
whimpering
in the courtroom,
and whining.
I get their position.
That's more Adam Kinzinger.
That transparency is a virtue. Transparency is a good thing. I also believe that pen and pad can facilitate a whole heck of a lot of transparency.
What about that transparency when it comes to her decision-making on child porn? There, Mr. Vince asks. Oh, wait, no, he wants.
Effects of cameras. A huge part of why this institution doesn't work well is because we have
That's why
cameras everywhere.
people like Ted
Cameras
Cruz need a
change
little
human
help there.
behavior. We know this.
Putting this
You
on.
don't have the same kinds of conversation over the dinner table with your family when you're wrestling through issues and apologizing for something and saying, I said this before, but maybe I should modify what I said. My tone was jerky. My substance didn't account for your position. There's a whole bunch of things that humans can do if they're not immediately mindful of some distant camera audience that they might be trying to create a soundbite for. And Instagram can be useful for some small things, but for intellectual discourse, it is not a friend. And I think we should recognize that
Neither is Fox News.
jackassery we often see around is partly because of
He said jackassery.
camera opportunities.
He knows all too well what that means.
Definitely,
Not only from his fellow colleagues, but from himself.
The court should think through before it has advocates in there who are not only trying to persuade you 9 justices, but also trying to get on cable that night or create a viral video. So for what it's worth, I hope that the court doesn't respond to
Like, you were on cable for a while there?
From the Congress to push for cameras in the courtroom,
Mr. Ben
but
says?
also some bullying, and there are ways that you can get to a lot of transparency. Audio recordings are increasingly released from the Supreme Court in timelier fashion over the past few decades. So for what it's worth, I'm glad that you on the court are making that decision, and I hope it isn't made for you by the Congress. I want to go back to the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. That term has been...
Look at Ted Cruz's face, by the way. He's like, he's literally not going to actually ask anything. He's just going to just waste time.
And so,
Just looking at him like,
ways that the court
wow.
has been derided and called illegitimate by members of this Senate include, over the course of recent days and weeks, quote, leans into extreme partisanship, leans into extremism, twists the law, threatens basic liberties, has been hijacked by Republicans. These kinds of attacks undermine the public's trust in the court. We need the public to believe in the legitimacy of its government, including all 3 branches.
Lying.
So I would ask you, do you agree with these characterizations of the court that have been...
Because if we don't believe in them, then they won't exist eventually.
Senator, I have nothing but respect for my former judicial
Oh, well, like, believe that they work. Okay, yeah, but I mean, like, believe what they say.
hopefully my future.
You ought to always question that.
I do believe that we need legitimacy. I've said that that's the currency of the court, and I look forward, if I'm confirmed, to joining the institution.
So do you think there could be any opinion that would be handed down this term that could undermine the legitimacy of the court?
Senator, I think the Supreme Court makes its determinations, and all of them are precedents, and they are entitled to respect.
I'd like to come back to our conversation from yesterday. You pointed out a number of times that as both a district and now a circuit court judge, you were constrained and bound by the Supreme Court's holdings. You mentioned a couple of times that you haven't had a chance to do much constitutional interpretation for yourself. I largely agree with the way you framed most of that for the lower courts, but I think you would also agree with me that the job of the Supreme Court justice is different than a district court judge, and in certain ways from a circuit judge as well. When you serve on the Supreme Court, you'll have to interpret what the Constitution means, and based on what you told us about the constrained role on the lower courts, lower court decisions would then not be able to answer how you would approach the new job you would have on that highest court. And so that's why I thought our conversation on judicial philosophy yesterday was somewhat helpful. I'm not a lawyer, but I think you took a lot of us to law school yesterday in ways that were helpful. And in particular, you walked us through some different schools of constitutional and statutory interpretation in ways that I think were good for the committee, were good for the court, and were good for the public more broadly. So I guess I would ask you if you could take us to law school one more time and walk us through some of the different approaches to substantive due process and unenumerated rights. What are the different ideas on the Supreme Court and in the broader legal community?
Thank you, Senator. I am mostly familiar with the Supreme Court's precedents in this area. It's been a while now that the Supreme Court has determined that the 14th Amendment, which guarantees due process, includes a substantive component in addition to procedure. The term due process, one would think, is just about the procedures that the government has to afford you before it affects your life, liberty, or property. But the Supreme Court has also said that that protection extends to certain personal, individual rights that relate to dignity and autonomy, and that are deeply rooted in our nation's history and traditions, or implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. And the kinds of things the court has recognized pursuant to that line of jurisprudence are things like marriage, interracial marriage, the access to contraception, a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy, abortion, pursuant to or subject to the framework established in Roe and Casey, travel, the child rearing, the ability to
talk slower, waste your time.
Those are some of the rights that have been recognized pursuant to the 14th Amendment due process clause. I'm less familiar with the sort of scholarly debate outside of the Supreme Court's rulings.
So will there be new ones in the future?
Senator, I am not able to forecast. In every case, the Supreme Court is looking at a particular set of circumstances consistent with the Article 3 requirement that the court look only at cases and controversies. So it would depend on what cases came before the court.
So I think that gets at the challenge here that you and I have been going back and forth on over the course of a couple of weeks, because I get the modesty points about being on the district court, but it seems pretty important to understand what the limits might be as a justice. And so I think this morning, again, you stated that I think the quote was that your judicial philosophy is your methodology, but I think that a judicial philosophy of some kind is necessarily an input into your judicial methodology and into every justice's actual jurisprudence on the court. And that's why I think it's important for us to unpack that, because the philosophies that you've outlined for the committee, again, I think yesterday's back and forth that you and I had on Breyer v. Scalia is important, and you wouldn't claim any of those philosophies for yourself, and yet I think the philosophies ultimately instruct judges on the sources and the tools they consult, on how they discern intent, on whether the Constitution is protecting specific, limited, and defined principles or more general values, and whether modern values can be used to infuse our understanding of the Constitution. So again, when you narrated a bit of the debate between Justice Breyer, I know you've got lots of intellectual inputs in life, but you've credited him as a brilliant jurist and role model before, and the Scalia debates, you didn't really tell us who you thought got the better of the argument.
Oh, later, Jimmy. I'm sorry I didn't
2 days, you focused a lot
catch his last couple. Since these people got to be tired of the lies, and now they knows maybe it gets them off. And then he said he's out. Have a good night.
I believe we still
Okay,
have
later, Jimmy.
Judicial philosophy, and I wish I'd made more progress with you on that. But what we do know
Is my icon not working?
Is that these
Yeah, your avatar's not there.
have been very long, and I want to thank you.
Neither is mine. Now we're equal.
Hey.
That great equality that this lady loves her somehow, right? Now we're all equally gray as shit and colorless.
Anyway.
So then, I mean, for whatever reason, I thought it was he had a couple good points in there for her. I know he's an ass, but at the same time,
Ben Sass the Ass is the name. Don't wear it out.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Senator.
We don't have a lot of time, so let's get straight into it. Senator Cruz was asking you at the end of his time in questioning.
See, this
about
is
United
why
States
people
versus
need to
Stewart.
work together.
This is the case where Neil
right here.
Stewart tried to cross state lines to rape another person's 9-year-old daughter. He had 6,700 images and videos of egregious and brutal child pornography. The government recommended 97 months. The guidelines said 97 to 121 months. You came in at 57 months. Senator Cruz asked you why. The chairman wouldn't let you answer. I thought maybe you'd like to answer now.
Thank you, Senator. No one can stand in for a judge's entire record. I have sentenced more than 100 people.
We're talking about a specific
variety
ideology you might happen to have.
circumstances.
Of course, we know this.
Every case.
This is why we're
And especially
bullshitting.
cases that involve the kinds
True.
of acts that you're talking about, the kinds of evidence that I had to deal with as a judge. In every case, I am balancing the factors that Congress has determined are appropriate and required for a judge to make a determination. The data points that Senator Cruz pointed to that you may have in front of you don't account for all of the information that was before me as a judge and the authority that you all, Congress, and your prior confirmation when I was a district judge provided for me to exercise my judgment, and I treated those cases and every case very seriously and imposed a sentence that was sufficient but not greater than necessary to promote the purposes of punishment.
Would it surprise you to learn that Mr. Stewart's a recidivist? There was warrants issued again for his arrest just 3 years after you sentenced him.
Would it surprise me?
Yeah, would it surprise you?
You know, Senator, there is data in the Sentencing Commission and elsewhere that indicates that there are recidivism, serious recidivism issues. And so among the various people that I've sentenced, I'm not surprised that there are people who reoffend, and it is a terrible thing that happens in our system.
Yeah, indeed it is. Let me ask you about the Hawkins case. You and I talked about this yesterday. You've been able to think about it overnight. This is a case where you had an 18-year-old who possessed and distributed hundreds of images of 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds, and you gave him, frankly, a slap on the wrist sentence of 3 months.
Senator,
Do you regret it?
I don't remember whether it was distribution or possession. In
It was
the law,
both. Do you regret it?
In the law, there are different crimes that people commit.
Judge, you
in
gave
this
him 3
area.
months. My question is, do you regret it or not?
Senator, what
Just to answer the damn
I
question,
regret
do you regret it?
that in a hearing
Yep.
about my
Oh, can you hear me?
qualifications to
Yes.
Okay.
be a justice on the Supreme Court, we've spent a lot of time focusing on this small subset of my sentences, and I've tried to explain.
You regret that we're
many
focusing on
times-
your cases? I don't understand.
No, no, no. I'm talking about the fact that you're talking about
Child pornography
7
cases.
very serious cases.
I'm glad we agree on that.
some of which involve conduct that I sentence people to 25, 30 years.
3 months
for.
in this case, Judge. Do you regret it? You haven't answered my question yet. Do you
Senator,
regret this sentence?
There it is.
Senator,
Where's
I
Jerry?
would have to look at the circumstances. What I'm telling you,
You know the circumstances. We discussed it for half an hour yesterday. There's a 55-page transcript, which I'm sure you've read. You
I
lived
did
it.
not- I
As
did
you've
not-
emphasized to this committee over and over, you've lived it, right? You said that you've been through all of this. You've looked at all of the images. You're the one who's had to endure all of it. You gave him a 3-month sentence. I just wonder if you regret it or if you stand by it. I mean, do you stand by that sentence?
Senator, in every case, I followed
She told
what
Ted
the
Cruz.
It's a
judge
yes or no.
authorized me to do in looking
Now she can't say
to the
anything.
best of my ability at all of the various factors that apply, that constrain judges, that give us discretion, but also tell us how to sentence. And I ruled in every case based on all of the relevant factors.
So you don't regret it?
No one case, Senator, can stand in for a
I'm not asking that.
entire
I'm asking
record.
if you regret this sentence in this case. And it sounds like the answer is no. But I want to tell you I regret it. I regret that you gave him only 3 months. Let me read to you what you said about these kinds of cases. And you said, make no mistake, Mr. Hawkins,
Burned
the children you
to
saw
a
in those pictures were not willing
crisp.
participants in the conduct that you witnessed. They were being forced to commit unspeakable acts of sexual violence for the pleasure of the person who was filming and for the gratification of sick people everywhere.
And then
People
she
who
let him
apparently have
off.
no shred of empathy
Gotta love
for
how
what
that
this
works.
must be doing to the children who are being abused in this way. You go on. Some of the children you saw in those pictures will never have a normal adult relationship. Some of them will turn to drugs and prostitution and other vices to try to deal emotionally with the pain that results from the torture that they have experienced. And even those who manage to lead a somewhat normal adult life say they live in constant fear of being recognized. Some people are even unable to leave their houses because once those pictures are on the internet, they are there forever. And the victims can't do anything without worrying that every person that they meet has seen them in their most vulnerable state at the most horrible time in their lives. That's your words, pages 34 and 35 of the transcript. Powerful words.
Am I being
Judge.
too loud,
I
by
just
the
don't
way?
understand why
No,
after
you're fine.
saying this and believing this, you could give this guy 3 months in prison when the probation office that we've heard so much about recommended 18 months. Even the probation office recommended 18 months. Do you have anything to add?
No, Senator.
No. Absolutely nothing.
Children, like there were in the Hawkins case, who are 8, 9, 10 years old, when there are prepubescent children involved. I'm just struggling to understand this. You said it in Hawkins. You said that you weren't going to give him an enhancement. You weren't going to make his sentence any tougher, despite the fact that we had all of these terrible videos that you and I talked about at length yesterday. This is page 38 of the transcript, just so that we're all following along. You said, in your case, I don't feel that it is appropriate necessarily to increase the penalty on the basis of your use of a computer, and we talked about that, or the number of images or prepubescent victims as the guidelines require, because these circumstances exist in many cases, if not most, and they don't signal an especially heinous or egregious child pornography offense. You said the same thing in the Cooper case just last year. This was an individual, Cooper, who was 30 years old at the time of his sentencing. He pleaded guilty to distributing child pornography. He posted between 3 and 4.
Do you think she's going to answer this question?
Of child exploitation to Tumblr, where it could be accessed publicly. The government said, and I'll quote from the transcript in that case, page 37, when his devices were found, including the computer, within the computer and on an untitled folder were many videos.
No, of course not.
The nature of these videos went well beyond mere child pornography. The government says, I don't mean to make light of the content of any child pornography.
By the way,
Rather
Uncivil
to
Law
say
was
that
pretty
the
good
content
today.
of
He
those
also had a
videos is on the
Junior
more
Melon and
egregious or
what's his
extreme
face?
spectrum of the
God.
child pornography videos that are encountered.
Yeah, they're Jewish lawyer, but he
in
wears
these cases.
a yarmulke more
And
prominently.
yet, when you sentenced him,
Coleman, something?
you
Oh,
said, I'm
Ron
quoting
Coleman.
now from the transcript
Yes,
from Cooper,
yes,
I'm
him.
really
He's
reluctant
great.
to get into the nature of
Yeah, he's a good guy.
And then later, it's very difficult to assess how different Mr. Cooper's images are than those of other similarly situated child pornography defendants, such that I, without going into looking at them, and I'm not an expert, you say. So you say, while I understand the government's arguments, Mr. Miranda, the government's arguments in that regard, I don't find them persuasive from the standpoint of characterizing this as an especially egregious child pornography offense. Help me understand this, Judge. Why is it that what's your policy disagreement with the guidelines treating images, videos, pornographic images that have small children, infants, 7, 8, 9-year-olds? Why won't you give an enhancement for those? Help me understand that.
Thank you, Senator. I'll make 2 responses. First, that's not my policy disagreement. I don't know why you've characterized that in that way.
Well, wait a minute. You say right here in the cases. I mean, this is well, I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing here. This, in the Hawkins case, I don't feel that it's appropriate necessarily to increase the penalty on the basis of your use of a computer or the number of images or prepubescent victims. And you say the same thing in Cooper.
Senator, two observations. One, I am sentencing in every case. I have policy disagreements with certain aspects of the operation of the guidelines that I lay out in every case as Congress has required and as the Supreme Court permits in light of my experience, not only as a district judge, but also on the Sentencing Commission, which did a report about the operation of the guidelines. Second, you've read extensively from the government's argument in this case. You've not provided information from the probation office or the defense. And when
I don't have the probation office report.
No, excuse me, Senator. The probation office provides a recommendation. There has been information gathered about what a recommendation was given in each one of these cases. I don't have that information here, but what I'm saying is that in every case, the judge is not just hearing from the government. The judge is not just evaluating what the government says in these cases. In every criminal case, a judge has to take into account all sorts of factors, including arguments being made by the defendant, by the government, by the probation office. So I understand that in certain cases, the government may have made an argument, but there are other people in our criminal justice system who make arguments. And the
Koolfrogg, I got another doggy alarm here. I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good.
Evaluates everything as Congress has directed, and no one case can stand in for my entire record of how I deal with criminal cases, or did when I was a district judge. I have law enforcement in my family. I am a mother who has daughters who took these cases home with me at night because they are so graphic in terms of the kinds of images that you are describing. They give you not only the actual videos, which you can ask to see, but they describe in the briefs in detail what these videos show. So I am fully aware of the seriousness of this offense and also my obligation to take into account all of the various aspects of the crime as Congress has required me to do, and I made a determination seriously in each case.
What I'm trying to understand is, why is it that you say multiple times that just because there are prepubescent victims in Cooper, in Hawkins, that does not signal that this is a heinous or egregious child pornography offense, and you're not going to apply any sentencing enhancements that the government's asking you for? The sentence gets to be less because you say, I'm not going to apply. The government asked for enhancements related to prepubescent children, related to the nature of these images. You say, I'm not going to apply it. But I get what you're telling me is, I guess, that you don't have a policy objection. I mean, why didn't you apply the enhancements as they were asked for?
Senator, I've answered this question many times from many senators who've asked me, so I'll stand on what I've already said.
So you have nothing to add about why these crimes, why these images, in your view, do not signal an especially heinous or egregious child pornography offense. That's Hawkins. You say in Cooper, I understand the government's argument, but I don't find them persuasive, the fact that there were prepubescent children, from the standpoint of characterizing this as an especially egregious child pornography offense. That's page 58.
She's just horrible. She needs to be removed from proceedings. Just stop what you're doing right now. Don't even continue. Why we're even here is beyond the point. If she gets selected, there's I don't even know. I don't even know what to say to that. There's no way she can get selected. There's no way. This is horrible.
Let me ask you this. You said to Senator Graham earlier today that you were trying to do what's rational. and you didn't in sentencing in these cases, and you didn't think it was rational to sentence people who had thousands of images by using a computer to the sentencing guidelines, to the mandatory range. I'm sorry, it's not mandatory, to the no longer mandatory range, the discretionary range.
No, Senator, I said the guidelines system is designed to be rational.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Why isn't it rational to sentence people who have thousands of images on a computer to more time as opposed to somebody who has one or two pictures in the mail? In other words, the more images there are, why wouldn't you want to sentence that person to more time rather than less? Why isn't that rational?
Senator, I've answered this question, and I'll stand on what I already answered.
So, but your answer is what? I mean, refresh my memory.
Senator, I've answered this question. I've explained how the guidelines work, and I'll stand on my answer.
But the guidelines are not mandatory. I wish they were, but they're not. The Supreme Court made that determination. I'm trying to understand why you think it's rational not to sentence criminals based on the number of images they have. You say that this is a policy disagreement that you have with the guidelines. This gets to the core of your judicial philosophy. You served on the Sentencing Commission where you recommended changes to the guidelines based in part on this policy disagreement. So I think it's relevant and indeed vital we understand.
He pretty much goes through this, for the next how many minutes. It's the same back and forth. She's not going to give him an answer. She's not going to give him an answer at all. She doesn't care to give him an answer. Not once does he get an answer from her. And because he doesn't get an answer, just going to skip a little bit forward here. It's right here.
Mr. Chairman, I'm asking to be recognized to make a point to the chairman.
I believe he recognized me. May I proceed?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I waited my turn on here. I've been on this committee for 47 years. I think we ought to follow the regular order.
I've been on this committee for 47 years, and I think we need to follow the regular order. You've been on this committee for 47 years. You've had something to say with everybody that's been put into SCOTUS for the last 47 years? That's concerning. That's very concerning that somebody's been on this committee, this particular committee, on selecting SCOTUS for 47 years. He's had influence on anybody and anything that he wants. He's done the same that these guys are doing here. That you think about it, subtract 47 years from his 80, and he'd be in the 40s that these guys are, that Hawley and Cruz are, and you can add it together. He's been pushing this. He's been pushing buttons like this for a long time. It's time to start some term limits.
Mr. Chairman, the witness just said...
Switch committees every other year or something. I don't know. There has to be something that needs to happen for all this to stop.
That we cannot understand those without
Senator,
the pre-sentence report.
I don't want to go through this again.
I have a letter that I want to enter into the record that's signed by 10 senators on this. Are you not going to allow a letter from 10 senators on this committee?
Any letter, you can do it.
This letter that is signed by 10 senators on the committee addressed to you makes the point that the White House gave you probation information for Democrats that was not provided to the minority on this committee. And just now, Judge Jackson told Senator Hawley, you cannot understand these cases without reading the probation reports. 10 senators on this committee are asking the chairman to provide those reports so we can do what Judge Jackson just said, which is to assess those reports. And here is the letter. I ask unanimous consent to be admitted to the record.
I know the junior senator from Texas likes to get on television. but most of us have been here a long time trying to follow the rules. And he could very easily hand you a letter to go in the record. He's saying he's doing this to help Senator Hawley. Senator Hawley could have put it in, and he didn't. But let's get back to regular order.
Senator Hawley didn't write the letter. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that it be admitted to the record.
Senator Rono.
Thank you.
Are you denying consent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aloha, Judge Jackson.
We're not listening to this lady. No way. No way. But there seems to be an interesting colloquy that happens after she's done. If you don't know what a colloquy is, you should look it up and actually get the proper definition. But it's for what it is. It's a little jab towards each other. Little conversation per se. It's very fun.
Yeah, I have a letter here signed by members on my side of the aisle I'd like to put in the record.
Without objection, I'd like to comment. I had a chance to review this letter for the first time just a minute ago. There's apparently a concern on your side, Mr. Chairman, about whether you have on your side of the aisle access to all the information that we have on this side of the aisle and all the information that's in the possession of the White House. During a break earlier today, I met with the ranking member, Senator Grassley, his staff, and with White House staff to discuss it. Here's my understanding of what has transpired. Last Wednesday evening, the senator from Missouri selected a handful of Judge Jackson's more than 1,000 district court cases to claim that Judge Jackson, quote, endangers our children, close quote. On Thursday, the next day, the White House contacted Judge Jackson's chambers to request the probation office recommendation in each of the cases. I underline probation office. That probation office provided a chart reflecting these recommendations. This is the sum total of what was provided. They shared with the White House from the chambers. When the senator from Missouri continued to raise questions and request the probation office's recommendation in these cases, the probation office provided this chart reflecting those recommendations, which was shared with the White House. When the senator from Missouri continued to raise questions about Judge Jackson's sentencing record, my staff asked the White House for information about the probation office recommendations. These are just numbers for each one of the cases. That's all that is. The White House and my office didn't have this information earlier because we didn't know the senator from Missouri was going to make this claim in the first place. Once the Republican side requested the same information, my staff shared it within minutes. So now your side, Senator, has exactly what the White House and the Democratic side has. The same chart provided by the probation office. And I might add that some of this had been published in the press, in Washington Post and other places, but it consists in each case of the case number, name, the probation office recommendation for custody, the sentence imposed custody, probation office recommended supervision and release, and the supervision and release imposed. All of that information has now been shared equally. Some information on the other side, on the Republican side.
Why wasn't it shared equally before? What was wrong with just doing so right out straight?
And the reason being, we didn't anticipate this objection from the senator from Missouri and request that information. Now, the letter also goes a step beyond, which I think is a very important decision for this committee to make. This request for pre-sentence reports from each of these cases. Now, these pre-sentence reports are typically filed under seal. They can contain highly sensitive personal information, not just about the defendant, but about innocent third parties and victims. We've spent a lot of time here reflecting on these terrible crimes. Everyone has acknowledged how terrible they are and how damaging they can be to the victims. We've heard story after story, and I don't question a single word that was spoken in sympathy for these same victims. I would not want it weighing on my conscience that we are turning over these pre-sentence reports to this committee for the first time in history and that information out of this, or because it was released, would somehow compromise or endanger any victim as a result of it. This information was not requested before. It's never been requested by this committee. And I think we ought to think long and hard about whether or not we even consider going into pre-sentence reports. So I'm going to take this matter up with our side, and I'm sure you will with your side. I have your letter requesting it. As far as this information, you have exactly what we have, no more, no less. In terms of pre-sentence reports, this is a critical policy question, which ought to be carefully weighed. It goes way beyond, I'm sorry, Senator Judge Jackson, it goes way beyond your nomination. And I want to make certain that we don't take a step here that endangers the lives or well-being of innocent people.
It's a very interesting thought, and it's like, holy, why, what in the world? One side has information that the other doesn't, and vice versa. They need to stop it. They need to start working together a little bit better and stop pointing fingers at each other. The division in this country, through politics and anything else, needs to stop. The only way we get there is by actually just loving each other. And nobody seems to ever want to do that. It's very saddening.
Since you just responded to the letter that I wrote and was submitted on behalf of 10 senators, I will point out that in Judge Jackson's answer to Senator Hawley, she said that he and this committee did not have sufficient information to assess her sentencing decisions because we heard the arguments of the prosecutors in the transcript, but we did not have the recommendation from the probation office. And what she testified under oath is you can't understand why she issued her sentences without having those probation reports. You are right that there can be sensitive victim information in those reports, and everyone on this side, I'm confident, would agree to redacting out any information that would violate the privacy of a victim. But Judge Jackson has told us it is relevant to understanding those cases, and that's why 10 of us have requested we have those reports, and there's explicit statutory authority for us to do so that is cited in the letter we just submitted.
Senator, I don't know where other members of your caucus stand on the basic question of this nomination. They can decide on their own, and they will, and they should. That is their responsibility. I think I know where you're headed. And I would just suggest that we ought to think long and hard, my friends, about members of the Judiciary Committee endangering the lives of innocent people to pursue this line of questioning. We spent 2 days, 15, 16, 17, 18 hours, and a large part of it on this issue. I don't believe these pre-sentencing reports are going to change anyone's disposition if they're going to vote on this issue. And I do not want it weighing on my conscience that I gave the green light to release this information so that it might endanger the lives of innocent victims. I'm sorry. That's a bridge too far for me. I think the issue before us on sentencing, you each had a chance to hear plenty of testimony on it. And I believe this should be taken up with the individual caucuses on both sides, if you wish. But that to me it's gone way too far. Way too far. I don't want it on my conscience.
Mr. Chairman, if I might. When I agree with you, I've prosecuted literally thousands of people. I would have to go back. It's over 8 years. I can't remember the hundreds of sentencings I was at when we had pre-sentence reports. Over and over again, there were things in there that were sensitive. Sometimes reflecting somebody who were putting their lives on the line to even give a report. Neither the defense counsel or I as a prosecutor ever thought those would be made public. And we assumed that the judges, we had judges across the political stripes who read them, kept the confidence of that. As a result, we knew that the reports were thorough. And a judge has the final say, but as a prosecutor, I might have a recommendation, but I never questioned a judge who might give a different sentence, because my responsibility was to prosecute. Theirs was to sentence.
Senator Lee.
Yeah, might I just weigh in here? I totally understand the concern that you're describing relative to the confidential nature of pre-sentence reports. As a prosecutor and as a law clerk, I reviewed those with some regularity, and I understand the sensitivity of them. Let me suggest a couple of things. First of all, it's not unusual for us as a committee and as members of the United States Senate to review materials that would be inappropriate for public release. I don't think one of us...
That's another thing. I'm sick of these lawyers being senators. Who said that lawyers needed to be senators? Why can't we just have a regular old senator? Is there a recommendation that you needed to be a lawyer to become a senator? I don't remember ever reading anything that said that you needed to be a lawyer to become a senator. Stop electing lawyers to become these senators. That's what's wrong. Nick McKay to tell you straight out, lawyers are not good.
Us suggesting that. There are means by which we can review things in a classified environment and treat them as classified. We've done that with significant success in this hearing. Secondly, to the extent that wouldn't provide the level of comfort necessary, we'd also be happy to review them on a redacted basis. These are things that have become relevant in our conversations. We want to make sure that we have the facts, but not one of us wants to endanger anyone or to render public information that is sensitive in nature. There are abundant ways around that.
I would suggest that the information contained in these reports is dangerous to the victims and to the innocent people who are mentioned in these reports, and unnecessary at this point.
Of course he would.
It's never been requested by this committee. It's merely a fishing expedition in dangerous
Well,
territory.
it is very dangerous.
Classified settings, redacted versions of the reports
For the
this
victims.
never happened in the history of this committee. And I would say, Senator, I will just tell you, I am not going to be party to turning over this information and endangering the life of an innocent person for a political quest to find more information. We have exhausted this topic. We've gone to it over and over again.
Okay now, Dirty Dick. Don't bust a gasket now.
That's my personal feeling. I take it to Senator Leahy made.
We don't want your dick juices all over everybody.
This nominee has been
Come on
this
now.
committee for 18 hours.
Allegedly.
I don't believe that,
Oh, we're at 2.5 hours. We're okay. We're
decide
almost
what you
done.
want to do to go forward. I've told you my position. I want to proceed if I can. I thank the nominee for waiting for this colloquy, and I turn it over to Senator Cotton.
Judge, I want to return to the question of...
We're not going to listen to Cotton. Or that was this is Senator Lee. I kind of wanted to listen to him, but we're already at 2.5 hours. I think we should skip and go right to Marsha. Marsha was the last one again.
Marsha. Marsha this, Marsha that. Marsha.
You didn't know where that's from, right?
Yeah. Dude. I'm going to be 45 years old. Yes, I know of the Brady Bunch. Very, very much so. That was like a very popular show at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that Senator Ossoff is over there watching your wonderful family and taking note because he's a new daddy. And if you have time, he'll show you pictures. But indeed, we have all enjoyed hearing about your family and your parents and how hard they worked to open doors of opportunity for you. And look at how you went through those doors and really created such a wonderful life. And I mentioned yesterday that I would hear from friends in Tennessee, and so many of them talk about they like how you have pushed those barriers aside, because a lot of them have had to do the same thing to kind of make their way into careers. And so they've appreciated that very much about you. And I'll have to tell Senator Booker, now I like the fact that he talked about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And when my daughter was in high school, I actually bought that poster, and I've probably told Senator Klobuchar this before, but I bought that poster of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and they're dancing, and it says, "I took every step he took, but in high heels and backward," just to make the point with her that she was going to have to work hard. And indeed, she accepted that challenge, and I'm really proud of her, like I know all parents are proud of their children. I do want to get to a couple of things, and we do have the vote on the board. Yesterday during our discussion, you had mentioned that you were unfamiliar with some of the statements that I had read back to you, your previous statements and writings, including the statements on child pornography and critical race theory. I was a little surprised by that because I know the White House has worked really hard to prepare you for the hearing. So I wanted to introduce documents just so that we have those in the record, Mr. Chairman. The first document is an article in which you're quoted as praising the progressive curriculum at Georgetown Day School. The quote appeared in the winter 2019-2020 edition of Georgetown Days magazine. You stated, and I quote, "Since becoming a part of the GDS community 7 years ago, I've witnessed the transformative power of a rigorous progressive education," end quote. Second document is a transcript of a 2012 hearing before the Sentencing Commission at a time when you were vice chair of the commission. The topic was child pornography offending Pathways Community Treatment. You stated during the hearing, and I quote, "I had mistakenly assumed that child pornography offenders are pedophiles." So I went back and pulled
that's a mistake?
to show that it was a statement
Is
and
it?
not a question. So,
Oh,
Mr. Chairman,
really?
I ask permission to enter those.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm back. I had to.
No, you're
time
good.
again there for a
We
second.
talked about abortion.
Did you listen to Marsha
I wanna
earlier?
go back to that.
Some I didn't catch it all.
Question there.
Oh, okay. It's
Some have argued that
while you're here.
to protect.
I mean, you don't have to rewind it for me. I can watch it.
No.
later.
Mr. Chairman, I
No,
ask
we're gonna-
permission to enter those.
Without objection.
Oh.
Thank the offenders are pedophiles. So I hearing
This very much
before
reminds
the
me of
Sentencing
yesterday's. And she's asking, I guess, the same things.
Kinda, but she kinda really leans at this one right here. It's kinda interesting.
At a time when you were vice chair of the commission. The topic was child pornography offending Pathways Community Treatment. You stated during the hearing, and I quote, "I had mistakenly assumed that child pornography offenders are pedophiles."
She mistakenly assumed that child pornography offenders are pedophiles. So they're not?
According to this lovely lady, the sixth member of the Jackson Five, who are apparently, yeah.
So I went back and pulled that to show that it was a statement and not a question.
That's a joke about her last name. I don't actually think Michael Jackson did anything.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talked about abortion yesterday, and I want to go back.
Just
to
for
that,
those who are
on abortion.
listening and thinking
I
about
have
that
another
statement.
question there. Some have argued that bills seeking to protect children who survive abortions are unconstitutional. They say that the right to an abortion includes the right to an effective abortion. So, in other words, does the constitutional right to an abortion include the right to let a baby die if that baby unintentionally survives an abortion. I'd like to know if you agree with that.
Thank you, Senator. Issues like the one that you have raised are in the court system now, and as a result, as a nominee to the Supreme Court,
I have to give you the same answer that I gave everybody else, because I don't know how to give you a straight out answer that you request.
You know, one of the main factors the Supreme Court is considering is deciding whether to uphold Roe in all of this.
And by the way, I think that's kind of shit that, like, they can't respond to something that's going on in the courts because, I mean, if you're going to decide something that's that horrific, that's that major unconstitutionally, and then they're going to put you in there, and then every other decision after that's going to be unconstitutional, and you can't tell them yes or no to that question, like, I just think that's bullshit. I know that that's their, you know, oh, well, that's the way we do things. We can't really talk about it, whatever. I don't think that should be the case myself. Because how the hell else are you supposed to know? What's your position on this? What's your position on this? Is it constitutional? Is this not? Are we going to put you on the court because are you going to follow the constitutional law or not in this case? It's like, oh, well, that would make it political. It's like, well, no, it's supposed to make it a legal question. You all are supposed to agree on the Constitution, unless, of course, you want to manipulate it, in which case, right?
Oh, is that what they're doing?
Is if all of this is a settled issue or not. And some of those that are on this about whether it is to an abortion or an effective abortion, and if that constitutional right includes the right to terminate the life of a baby that survives that abortion. So that is an issue that will be decided before you go to the court. But I think it's important to have that
Thank God.
discussion. I do want to go back to the issue about the child predators. And as you've heard, Senator Blumenthal and I are working on legislation. Senator Klobuchar's got some legislation that deals with technology. But I want to ask you this because of some of the questioning, and it's just a yes or no. Do you believe child predators are misunderstood?
Senator, I don't have a context for that. I believe
well, I'm going back to the comment on the
What context do you need, bitch?
As you
Right,
said,
it's just a question. What's wrong with answering a question?
Senator, I believe that all child predators are dangerous, that the behavior that they engage in is horrible, that it needs to be taken seriously by the court and by Congress in setting the penalties for their behavior.
So, is it your position that child
Yeah, she just automatically switches the penalty over to Congress again.
Senator, I believe that the statement...
As though she has no discretion. Oh, wait, she does. No, she doesn't. Yeah, she does. She doesn't. Okay, she does sometimes. But she kind of doesn't. But then she does, but she doesn't.
It was a meeting,
It was a meeting, and what the Sentencing Commission does is it reviews evidence about various things, and I believe I was...
Right, and as I said yesterday, the children that are victimized, they don't understand the difference between an offender and a pedophile or a pornographer. And I do think it's a distinction without a difference. Let me ask you about gun rights. Violent crime is rampant. We have seen that
Do you have a thought?
I mean, I was thinking about what Uncivil was talking about earlier today, where he said that's technically incorrect because that's kind of like an always or a never type of a statement, whereas, you know, like every singular case, and legally speaking, it wouldn't be that. I mean, practically speaking, for, you know, literally every single case, yeah, it's true. I mean, are you going to find one case where somebody was just like, oh no, I was honestly just doing this because of this? I mean, maybe like one particular time some rando just decides to, like, okay, sure, I'll, you pay me like $500, I'll record whatever you want. Like, I mean, maybe they're not pedophilic or whatever. Maybe they're just completely soulless. I don't know. But at the same time, like, I mean, seriously, like, I mean, again, I do agree with her. It is a distinguishment without a difference. But legally speaking, of course, it's like, oh, we can't really, even though I think it should say that legally, at this point in time, it doesn't. So technically, right? But, but anyways, but this part I heard of her, like, from, I think, like 5 minutes ago until up to here and onward. I heard this.
Oh, okay. So let's continue.
During the last year, it's making people
Push on through.
Pulled some stats.
Rolling.
She's got another 13 minutes of
44% increase in homicides since 2019. Over a dozen cities set new homicide records in 21. And a lot of families no longer feel safe. So they're buying guns, they're buying ammo, and trying to make certain that they can protect themselves. And in times like this, I think we're really fortunate that the founders afforded such constitutional protection as the Second Amendment. So very quickly, walk me through what current Supreme Court precedent says about the Second Amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Current Supreme Court precedent says that under the Second Amendment, there is an individual fundamental right to keep and bear arms in the home, and the opinion focuses on those circumstances.
Okay, and so you agree it is an individual right and not only reserved to militias, because there are some that keep trying to say it's only reserved to militias. But if my memory is correct, you base this on District of Columbia versus Heller, that it is an individual
Yes, ma'am.
right.
The Supreme Court has established it's an individual right.
I wanted to get that on the record because I don't think anybody had asked you that this entire time. Here's another question. I've asked other judicial nominees that are coming to us for the district court and the appellate court, and I've really not gotten a satisfactory answer from anybody. So why is it constitutionally permissible for the right to keep and bear arms, which the Supreme Court has recognized as a fundamental right, and you agree with that? Why is it constitutionally permissible for this right to be subject to the discretionary issuance of a license by a local official?
Thank you, Senator. The Supreme Court is looking at that very issue in a case before it right now. And as a nominee for the Supreme Court, it's important that I not speak to it.
Again, another no answer, because I don't want to give you my opinion to influence anybody else's opinion, because if I do, there, seriously, if this lady gets in, something needs to happen, because there has to be somebody better than this.
Because the court is deciding this question. It has a pending case. I believe arguments have even occurred related to it.
So should other unenumerated rights be subject to the same type forbearance, having to get a local license? Should someone that wants an abortion have to go before a government bureaucrat? Because the Second Amendment, that right to keep and bear arms, is enumerated in the text of the Constitution. So the question would be, why should it have to have an extra burden?
I understand the question. It's one that the Supreme Court is looking at, and consistent with past practice and the need to ensure that I'm not speaking to issues that are
Okay.
live.
All right, then let me move on. I want to turn to some of the sentencing decisions, and particularly your decision to grant criminal defendants compassionate release. And you have an unmistakable pattern of releasing criminals with dangerous backgrounds into the community, and the COVID-19 pandemic seemed to exacerbate the trend. To name just a few examples, you use the COVID-19 pandemic as justification to release a fentanyl drug dealer, a bank robber addicted to heroin, a convict who murdered a U.S. Marshal back on the streets. And at a time when violent crimes, including homicide, are spiking all across the country, and we're facing an opioid epidemic driven in large part by the trafficking of fentanyl across our border, how can you stand by your decision that these offenders do not pose a danger to the community?
Thank you, Senator, for allowing me to answer this question.
I bet she doesn't have an answer for the question.
What made you think that? Like all the other times, there's not an answer to anything, literally at all?
Statutes govern judges and that allow for compassionate release are policy.
I mean, she's literally a Disney Plus TV show character. She has no background. She has no philosophy, quote unquote. But yet, all of a sudden, everything is left and liberal.
That's
and
what it is. That's Dr. McStuffins. Oh my lord. It's her. All grown up.
Made
God.
To permit individuals.
And then, of course, everybody in the background, it's like, oh my god, she's so wonderful. She's so amazing.
People who are
You are amazing. Why? I don't know. You are amazing. That's what the script says. You're amazing.
Convicted, and when they're sentenced,
Not to cut you off, but time's going to run out. We do have, this is a
Could you answer the question,
that
bitch?
I have been asked so much. Here's a stack. These are the ones that you sought for compassionate release. There were 1,561 that were detained in D.C.
I mean, it's pretty clear by now. She's a Soros lackey. She's a lefty freak and a hack. Every single thing she does is to try and destroy society, let all the criminals out, let all the pedophiles go free, let them keep doing whatever they're doing, give them the lowest minimum sentence possible. BLM, Antifa. I mean, it's the whole. She is a libtard, leftard, if there ever was one that existed. And of course, she gets all of her money from George Soros, I bet.
In your ability to order the universal
Sure.
release of criminals back onto the streets. And
Makes sense to me.
I am shocked that would have been your position, because people are so, they are.
Because it's not just simply that she is,
really
pedo crap, right?
about crime.
But that, it's the whole kit and caboodle. It's everything. It's,
That it would have been the
you know,
right thing to do. To
destroy
release
all of it,
those
wreck it all,
prisoners
let
back
them all
onto
go
the
free,
streets.
let them keep
Senator, that
torturing
was not
the
my
children,
position.
let them keep going crazy, let them,
United States versus Wiggins. I
burn it all to the
started
ground.
off by explaining that given the
Wreck it from the
compassionate
top
release
down.
system and the COVID-19 pandemic, it would seem as though that was an extraordinary and compelling circumstance.
A revolution
But
by
2
the elites
sentences
against the
later,
people.
I say we can't release everyone. There are people
That's
who
the
are
context.
too dangerous to release, and so even in Wiggins, I decided that he
Mr.
had to be
Wiggins.
incarcerated, notwithstanding his compassionate release motion. So the point, the sentence that I have there, I did say, but I said it to lead up to my statement, which was the actual ruling, in which I said, we are not releasing everybody. We're not opening the jails.
And Judge, you know,
And then you go off and do it.
See how that works? I didn't say. I just did it. Yeah.
That is what causes. That is a judgment issue, and that is what causes the concern with that. Let me go to the critical race theory issue, because you were asked yesterday about a speech you gave in April 2015 when you had stated, and I'm going to quote you again, that it melds to, when you were talking about sentencing, it melds together myriad types of law, including critical race theory. And you told Senator Cruz, I think it was, that when you made that statement, you were talking about decisions regarding sentencing policy. You said, and again I'm going to quote, I was talking about policy determinations. None of that relates to what I do as a judge. I take that to mean that you don't make policy determinations when you're making sentencing decisions as a judge. So today, in response to a question from Senator Grassley, you said the exact opposite. You said, and I'm going to quote you again, I have at times identified various enhancements that I have disagreed with as a policy matter because the Supreme Court has said that that's the authority of a sentencing judge in our system. So given that you admitted you made policy determinations in sentencing and you stated that you consider critical race theory in sentencing policy, let me ask you again, do you consider critical race theory in your sentencing decisions as a judge?
Thank you, Senator. Critical race theory,
Yes, I do.
Any academic theory is not considered in my sentencing. It never comes up in sentencing. It was not what I was talking about in the
That's not what we're referring to. We're talking about your philosophy again,
I appreciate
that you have talked about in a legal setting.
Question I'm going to submit to you for writing. You've had a long day.
Thank you.
And you've been very gracious. And I think that these are tough questions, but this is part of our doing our due diligence and meeting our responsibility to the people that we represent. And they expect this of us. And as I mentioned, they've been very engaged in this. As some have said, you know, I think I would like her, I don't agree with her, or I agree on some things, but not on everything. But they want to know what you're going to do when you get on the court, because their kids and their grandkids are not going to have the opportunities that you have had unless we keep this nation free. So it demands your best, and it demands that you go to the Constitution first. In your opening statement, I pulled this, and this is where I'll end with you. You say, I've been a judge for nearly a decade now, and I take that responsibility and my duty to be independent very seriously. I decide cases
Sorry
with
about
a
that.
neutral posture. I evaluate the facts, and I interpret and apply the
It's
law
okay.
to the facts of the case before me without fear or favor, consistent with my judicial oath. I wish you had said consistent with the Constitution of the United States. Thank you so much, Judge, for being with us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. This concludes our rounds of questioning. And before we recess, a few observations. First, Judge Jackson, you are extraordinary. Your story
Oh my god, here it is. Oh, you are just so amazing. You're so extraordinary. Oh my god. You're like a Disney character. You just, you know, you're like Rey from like freaking the new Star Wars series. Like, oh my god, she's just so amazing.
No,
She
I'm
can just
telling
like,
you, dude.
just
You
throw
need to
things
watch some Doc
lightning
McStuffins.
shoots out of her hands. It's like, it's just, oh god, you're just the most amazing. You're like a goddess, but you're just, you're even more than that. You're just amazing. Oh my god, it's just, oh. I mean, we should have a shrine to you. We should be worshiping you right now. It is a privilege that we even get to speak to you and not be struck dead at your mere presence. Like, oh, you're so wonderful. Like, give me a freaking break. Give me a freaking break.
He's got some sumo wrestler in his
qualified for this position. I
home.
won't read through your resume. It's been read many times. But I think there's no one in the room who in the 2-day period of time has questioned your qualifications. There have been some dissenters. My colleagues promised a fair and respectful hearing. Most, including my Republican colleague, Senator Grassley, followed that admonition. He always does. But there were a few obvious glaring exceptions. I'm sorry for that. But your patience, dignity, and grace in the face of what was frankly some offensive treatment is a real testament to your judicial temperament. To your mom and dad and the Brown family and your Chicago lawyer brother, I thank you for being with us.
The Brown family? That little racist there, Dirty Dig?
Well, I'm guessing that's where the Brown comes from. Is the parents, her parents were Browns, and she's a Brown / Jackson.
Wow, Koolfrogg, wow. I'm amazed. I'm truly amazed at how racist this discussion has become.
Part of this historic occasion. Dr. Patrick?
I'm astonished.
Any easier than this, but,
I disavow.
Want to get back to it. And I just want to say a word to Layla and Talia, if she's here or she can hear us. You got a great mom. You really do. And what she's been through in the last couple days, most people would
Oh, shut up. Shut up. Shut up. She's a piece of shit.
But she is strong.
She's a literal, immoral, wicked piece of shit.
You're lucky to have her. And we're going to be lucky to have her on the Supreme Court. So we've got a little bit of
We'd be lucky to have you.
That's a little facetious, don't you think, Mr. Durbin?
Filing in and out of the room behind you.
Wait, it's a little what?
He just she's going to be a great install. They still have to vote. Stop it.
That's the highest possible rating. We're going to
Let's all pray that she doesn't make it.
And convene in Dirksen 226 for a closed session for discussing the background investigation that should only take a minute or so. And I have discussed.
Let's pray she falls down a flight of stairs, gets paralyzed from the neck down, and can't speak anymore. And then that way she'll be completely incapable. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's pray that everything is actually okay with the great Clarence Thomas. Apparently they haven't released any information on him in a few days.
Oh, I wouldn't release any information either. Holy hell, I wouldn't release anything. I wouldn't even tell anybody. I would not tell anybody, pardon that. I would not tell anybody where I was. I wouldn't tell anybody anything. I would just leave it alone. These people are batshit right now. If I was him, I would do the exact same thing. I would lay low. If that's what he's doing, I hope that's what he's doing. Just, if he's out of the hospital, just go someplace else for a while, and then be like, maybe like 3 weeks later or something, like, okay, yeah, I go to Everett, whatever, fine. I'm over here. We'll be back to the court whenever court comes back, so forth. That's what I would do.
Court on this Monday, March the 28th at 3.
If he's as smart as I think he is, let's hope he's doing that.
The committee stands in recess. Thank you. Meeting is right now.
Oh, let's all clap. Oh, it's just, she's so beautiful. She's so wonderful. Oh, we are so pleasured by your presence. You complete goddess.
broadcast has concluded. So, like you said, the 28th, they got 4 days from now where they'll actually come forward and they'll actually say what they actually voted to do with this woman.
The strong woman of color, not size, unfortunately. We didn't get size in this one. That has to be a dox off Joe Biden's points there, his lefty points there. It wasn't a strong woman of size and color. I know that we could have gotten Stacey Abrams, but she was busy on the set of Star Trek, so being ever so popular as she is, because everyone loves Stacey Abrams enough to put her on what should be a popular TV show, but is tanking like shit.
So, all that being said, I mean, today wasn't as exciting as what yesterday was. Yesterday was a little bit more, more added or whatever. Today's Cloaky was actually very interesting. How they actually released information, pre-sentencing information, which, though it's not currently being released, I could see it actually being a thing where all of a sudden something happens, falls into the wrong hands, and if we have something, that, occurs. All that being said, let's call it a night. We are at 3 hours, 6 minutes. Nice little run. He is AmericaShirtsOurFirst.com.
I am, even though my logo's not there, it's still me. Hello. Yeah, and you can go to that website and grab yourself a very based t-shirt. In fact, the most based t-shirts on the planet. I'm so told. Again, it's just what the website says, ladies and gentlemen. That's not, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, but that is what the website says. And you can get 15% off any of those lovely shirts at the store by using the discount code Koolfrogg.
And I am Koolfrogg. You can actually find me almost anywhere. You can hit that link tree /Koolfrogg down below. That's KOOLFROGG. Check out any of those links. Follow me anywhere you'd like. If you do anything, you should go down below, like, subscribe, and share this video. I did put a little short out today, which is, I had fun making it or whatever. It was just a little something or whatever, just to see if I couldn't get a couple more clicks and get a couple more viewing hours, to occur. We'll get there eventually. We'll get there. We need some more followers, though. We need some more subscribers. If you subscribe, you hit up one of those links, tell me that you subscribed, who you are, and we'll get you a Discord link. That VIP door eventually will close. I don't know how far I'm going to allow that to actually happen. I mean, eventually, once you get too many people, then it turns into a frenzy. So we'll see what we can do.
A frenzy?
Yeah.
Because we don't be friends. Because I'm so funny.
Oh my god.
I just made his brain hurt.
That was horrible. Thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome for more pain as we leave. As we depart.
All that being said, thank you, folks. Don't forget to leave a comment, and thank you very much. BuyMeACoffee.com/Koolfrogg.
And his Buy Me Coffee, yeah.
Damn it. I did it again. I forgot to put that video in the thing. Oh well. Let's use something else. I didn't use all of these. I didn't use everything, did I? I skipped a couple. What's this call? Bye, everybody.
Later, peeps.